watching TBPN.
We got a bunch of news for you. We're going to take you through about 30 minutes of recap of the news. Then we got a stacked lineup. We have an update on Elon Musk. He's leaving Washington. Here's how that affects the Trump agenda. Interesting story with Elon. Obviously, he went into DC, built out the Doge team, had some wins, had some losses, some setbacks, some arguments, some debates. But he has now concluded his tenure as a special government employee, departing the White House. It's back to work on space, baby. Yeah. He's going back in. There's a lot at stake at SpaceX. We're seeing the 9th launch. Interestingly, the latest Starship launch broke up again. Another RUD, rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Great.
You hate to see it.
Great name for when your spaceship blows up.
But particularly bad for the people that were in the whole firmament camp.
Yeah. Because
it broke up on re-entry.
Yeah.
And so it had actually reached the peak velocity. So anyone that says, oh, it can't go through the atmosphere at all and space doesn't exist, bad day, because the latest Starship actually does in fact reach its peak. It could, in theory, drop off payload, and then it just breaks up on the way down, which means it's a very expensive, non-reusable spaceship right now.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, it breaks the whole economic model, doesn't actually work. So they got to figure out how to get it back without it breaking up. But good news that they're at least getting it there. But they have some really important milestones on the horizon that they need to hit. And so Elon's probably going back in there. Also, we saw the X outage and kind of, things falling apart there. I'm sure he's like, I need to be sleeping in that conference room too. Yeah. I need to be on the factory floor SpaceX and go directly to the conference room.
I heard a rumor that there were tents set up at the X HQ.
Okay.
For people to sleep in the office.
Because it'd be over the weekend when the site was down?
Recently.
Because
it was, it's embarrassing for your service to go down in such a big way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the culture there just doesn't tolerate, downtime. So,
although held up really nicely for us yesterday with Crypto Day.
Yes.
Massive day on the internet.
And the interesting thing is
Tesla.
The Tesla stock price has been pricing in Elon.
Didn't even get to Tesla.
Elon leaving Washington for a while. It's up 22% over the past month alone.
Because there was that whole Wall Street Journal report that said that Elon might be stepping down as Tesla CEO, and he said absolutely not, no chance. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's getting back in the game. Can you pull up the Poly Market on Tesla new CEO? I want to see that, and I'll take you through some of the news.
Probably down horrendously.
Probably, now that he's not working for the government anymore.
It's at a 1% chance.
Yep.
As of today,
So when is Elon Musk leaving the government exactly? As a special government employee, Musk's tenure was limited to 130 days, which runs out at the end of May. A White House official said that Musk's offboarding started Wednesday, adding that he hadn't been a regular presence in the West Wing in recent weeks. As my scheduled time as a special government employee comes to an end, I would like to thank President Donald Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending, Musk wrote on his social media platform X late Wednesday. And so
they also cut this off
Yeah.
because he specifically said the Doge mission will only strengthen over time as it becomes a way of life throughout the government. And I just had to call out that the Journal had to chose to not include the second part of that, which I think is important. Right?
Yeah,
he's not just saying, "See ya."
Yep.
He's saying, "Hey, I actually believe in this sort of."
I'm trying to reflect on
of the organization.
How much of this was expected and what actually is happening, because I feel like the prediction on the right was that Elon and Trump are going to be an unstoppable force forever. And they're going to reign forever, and they're going to clean up the government and do everything. And then on the other side, on the left, it was like they're going to have the most massive blow up, and they're going to be at each other's throats, and they're going to hate each other, right? And it's like, what actually happened? Like, seems like they kind of did some work together. They worked on a project together. They did a group project,
school project,
and it seems like maybe they're still kind of friends and kind of chilling, but also Elon's I got other stuff to do.
I think that Tesla Model Y is still parked outside of, or it's a S
Cybertruck or S?
Model S.
Okay.
Trump got the red Model S.
Oh, he did.
Parked it out front.
Yeah.
I'm
it doesn't seem like a blow up entirely. At least not from Trump and Elon. They seem to get along. Although Elon did say He's kind of, it seems like Elon's more like disillusioned with government overall because he said he's not going to be donating again. And that it seemed like there were so many special interests that once he got into the swamp, he was like, it's just too swampy.
It was like me with my HOA. bought my house, went to the first HOA meeting, being like, oh, this is a bright future. I'm excited. I'm going to revolutionize HOA. There's so many obvious things that we could do to improve the operations in the neighborhood. Yeah. Realized very quickly that there were some major,
I think you weren't chaotic enough. You should have launched like an HOA coin immediately.
Yeah.
Really shook things up.
Nobody's building at the intersection of HOAs and crypto.
No one is. No one is.
White space.
Long leg. Get on
White space.
Anyway, the Democrats are taking a little bit of a victory lap. Democrats took credit for Musk's decision to leave Washington, arguing that the extensive litigation and public pressure surrounding Doge forced his hand. He lost. Democracy won, wrote Norm Eisen, a co-counsel for the House Judiciary Committee during Trump's first
Which is interesting because as a special government employee, his tenure was limited to 130 days, and he's leaving at the end of that.
Yeah.
So taking a victory lap
normal.
And that's like saying you hired a contractor.
But also, I don't know. I feel like that 130-day thing, like we're kind of hearing about that for the first time now. Like that wasn't the way it was messaged beforehand. It was definitely messaged like Elon's going to be part of this team for 4 years. Like expect Doge to go on a generational run here and do a lot. It was not like, oh, Elon's, hey, just to set the record straight up front, he's going to be in for 130 days. So like, let's see what we can do then. Yeah. This is the first I've heard of the 130-day thing. So it feels like a little bit of
I
like.
I heard of that from another guest that we've had on the show who is a special government employee, and he had messaged it to me
earlier.
Like, it's just a sprint. It's a sprint.
Okay, interesting.
And
that's cool.
That was kind of core to the Doge strategy from the very beginning, is special government employees that are on these sort of shortened stints.
Yeah. That makes sense. So what did he actually do while he was in Washington? Asks the Wall Street Journal. Musk came into the government with bold plans to slash spending by as much as $2 trillion. In rapid-fire succession, Doge and Musk dismantled agencies such as the U.S. Agency for International Development and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, leaving thousands of federal employees out of work. Musk and his Doge team emerged after Trump's inauguration with a series of shock and awe moves that rattled the federal workforce. The subject, he sent an email to a lot of government employees, fork in the road, the same line Musk used in a 2022 email to Twitter employees shortly after he took over the company and renamed it X. Tens of thousands of federal workers took the offer to quit.
I'm going to send an email to the team tomorrow morning with the title Fork in the Road, and it's, do you guys want bacon or steak breakfast?
You're going to go somewhere with that. That's great. Musk's promise to slash the federal budget by trillions of dollars ran into the wall of non-discretionary spending programs such as Social Security and Medicaid. Doge said it had saved the government $175 billion from a combination of asset sales, contracts, lease and grant cancellations, workforce reductions, and other moves made since January 20th inauguration. So it seems like maybe a decent outcome. I don't know. It's like better to not waste that money, but yes, it doesn't correct the budget, and so it's not
the new
dramatic
spending bill, increases it dramatically.
So it's not. It's probably like better to have done some of that stuff than not. But the real question is Social Security and Medicaid, and so the answer to that: longevity drugs. Move the retirement age to 95. Solves all of this. Let's get Brian Johnson.
Brian has his way. It'll be 150.
Yeah.
Stay
that
in
really
the workforce.
Would change.
Keep grinding.
It would completely change entitlements if people could work longer. But very unpopular to ask people to do that. Big news. We have Balaji in the studio. We're going to bring him in, talk to him for about 45 minutes, take his temperature on what's going on in crypto. I want the update on what he's up to and really just take us on the whirlwind tour. We're going to get to the bottom of what happened in 1971. We're going to get the final answer. It's been hotly debated. Yep. We're going to figure it out right now.
The debate will be over.
Let's bring in Balaji. How you doing? Good to see you.
Great Welcome to the show. Good to see you guys. Hey,
it's amazing having you on the show. Can you give us just the update on what is your day-to-day like? I'm familiar with some of the prehistory, but what are you working on? What are you most excited about right now?
Sure. So I actually, can I project here?
Yeah, please.
Is it possible?
Yeah, you can share your screen.
All right. So about in Q4, we just opened something I'm calling Network School.
Yeah.
Can you guys see the opening day shot
cool.
there. Yep. So that was the kind of ribbon cutting.
Cool.
And this is something that combines a bunch of things I care about. Here's like the site is at ns.com. And actually,
great domain, by the way. A fantastic domain.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are connoisseurs also.
Yeah, we have a 4-letter
TBPNs.
domain. You're kind of destroying us with the 2-letter domain.
You mogged us.
All right. Well, we will. You know, I still, you know, you're
really
in the Four Commas Club or something. I guess I don't know. The Four Characters Club, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So break it down for me. I saw a 100K fellowship. I also see a school. Typically, I have to pay for school. Are you paying me? How does this all work?
Right. So this is essentially, there's several things that are happening at the same time.
Sure.
Like obviously traditional academia is basically over as we know it.
Yep.
It's about 10 different things hitting it at the same time. It's, you know, lost trust and credibility and so on.
Yep.
And, you know, what we've got here is we're doing global meritocracy, anybody from anywhere. Obviously Americans are welcome, but anybody who's what I call internet first is welcome, right? So if you're, you know, pro Bitcoin, if you're pro cryptocurrency, smart contracts and so on, you're pro AI, you're pro biotech, pro nuclear and whatnot. And those kinds of people exist all over the world.
Yeah, totally.
And so we're bringing them here. And so global meritocracy basically. Yeah. And there's Vitalik, there's Brian Johnson. Can you see the video? And stuff
incredible.
On screen? Yeah. So,
cool.
So this is it. Basically,
Fantastic
we're actually
lineups.
doing the startup society. So that's what Network School is. There's much more I can say about it, but that's the idea.
Okay, so walk me through the actual experience of joining. Is this cohort based? A lot of these new education initiatives, very few of them have just jumped straight to, we're going to replace a 4-year experience. And I don't know if that's because the 4-year experience is fundamentally broken. There's a lot of things that are potentially broken about higher ed. But what is your view on just the length of time that it takes to get whatever you need to out of academia or schooling generally?
That's right. So, well, very good question. It's a long topic, but
sure.
Just to level set, you know, I actually spent, 10 years at Stanford. I was an undergraduate, graduate, got my MS in chemical engineering, BS, MS, PhD, electrical engineering. I taught computer science and stats there. I'm a research scientist. I have 5,000 plus citations, blah, blah, did genomics, taught, computer science and so on at Stanford. So I know academia fairly well. And in fact, I thought for the first, 10 years or so of my adult life that I was actually going to be a professor. And then I, started a genomics company and, basically became, got into tech. And my view is there's many things I could say about the 4-year, college education, but one issue is it's like front loading all the cost to the beginning. And then there's zero budgeted for maintenance over somebody's life. So it's as if you paid $200,000 for a car and then zero for oil or gas or, wheel changes or so on for the rest of their life. And so people get this expensive education and they forget all of it just a few years later. Yeah. I'm sure if you gave retest, stats and looked at what percentage they actually retained, we know all the stuff about spaced repetition. Yeah. We know forgetting curves and so on. So basically the education is gone. And what you really want is something that's like continuous education over the course of your life, where, then like, for example, VO comes out or some new API comes out. What you want is to be able to quickly load that into your brain, be productive, and to have some budget every year in a continuous sense, as opposed to, like a upfront, forget everything sense. That doesn't even get into the fact that, unless you've been in the world of work, you don't actually appreciate how amazing it is to have just time to purely study. You have to learn everything on the job. It also is something like front loading the vacation and getting all these kids at age 18 into like a lifetime of student loan debt. There's many, many things wrong with it, but that era is ending. And then what's next? Like my view, why am I doing this? In part because how, actually we'll get right into it. You know how America started?
Loosely.
It was
Boston Tea Party?
Actually, America was started by the tech and the bro forming the tech bro. Let me explain. Okay. So
amazing.
Okay, here's why. Massachusetts was the tech, and Virginia was the bro.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So for those who don't know, like Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, that was the Puritans. They founded Harvard in the 1600s when, it was actually just a one-room schoolhouse, basically, a one-room place, right? It was a very, very small thing, very modest at the beginning. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was founded about 200-something years later, but basically Massachusetts has always been the center of like higher learning, education, and so on in the U.S. In Virginia, the Cavaliers, they were the bro. They were muscular, they were on horseback, and they like to shoot things and so on. And actually, Virginia was maybe the most important state during the American Revolution. And a lot of the early American leaders came from Virginia. That was like the founder CEO archetype, right? And both of these were actually different factions that at different times won and lost in the English Civil War of 100-something years earlier. The Roundheads went to Massachusetts. That was like the left of England, and the Cavaliers were like the right, and they went to Virginia. Anyway, so they basically, when the right and left were working together, that was the tech and the bro, right? And that's what made America really great when they were working together. Now, of course, not as much.
Let's say you have a husband and wife, and they have kids, and one of the adults, wants to participate in the network state, and the other parent is like, well, sorry, the kids are in preschool and ripping them.
Sure.
Like that feels like a large part of the people that you would want to recruit over time. And I can imagine exactly what your kind of answers to that would be, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Sure. So first of all, like my vision that is definitely family friendly. With that said, who moves and who moves at what times, right? So typically people move for education or employment, and they usually move in their 20s and so on and so forth. And once they're anchored in territory, they tend to only move if there's like a job for both husband and wife, for example, or if they're like refugees, like things get blown up, like in Ukraine or in the Middle East or what have you, or if they're like refugees from, for example, blue states, where the policy gets so bad that people just uproot and move, and there's like muggings or something like that, syringes, et cetera. Like a lot of people left blue states over the last 5 years, as you're aware, because of that in part. And I know some people say things are getting better or whatever, but at least in some places, but I think in general that exodus is still there. That's also actually how the U.S. itself was populated at the beginning. There's two different ways of founding startup societies, and they're complementary. The first is the Wild West frontier kind of thing, where you have single men coming out. But the second, actually, the Puritans had quite a few married couples coming out, but because they had an ideological or religious motivation. And then you also had waves of refugees from Europe. There's all kinds of crazy wars in Europe, like the revolutions of 1848, or famine in Europe, like the Irish potato famine, and that also brings like people out, right? But so the answer is there's only so much you can do at the beginning. In a sense, how Dropbox started as an individual product, and then it became a product for small teams, and then for enterprise.
Yeah.
Right. So in the same way, like you first kind of have to build a product that works for like the individual remote worker, then maybe the couple where it's a two-body problem, then the early family, then the scaled up family, then like the whole community of people who are moving together, or the whole startup that's moving together. And so it's just like, think of it as kind of going from individual to SMB up the ladder like that. So you definitely want families, and we actually have a lot of people who brought families. But the product for families is itself a product, just like Apple has a family plan, for example. There's new permission structures and so on, account structures and stuff you need for families. So
I like how you explain this in product-led SaaS terms.
That's great.
That's great. I think that makes sense.
I'm on the Tech Bros podcast, so I'm speaking.
No, it's perfect. No, and I totally buy that it's okay for these to initially be frontiers and sort of kind of establish base camp effectively, and then bring more people in over time.
Yeah, on the Bitcoin thing, I imagine that Bitcoin could be kind of the gold standard for many network states if they opt in. The interesting story that I've been toying with Bitcoin is that the narratives have shifted. Bitcoin promised a few things. It didn't deliver entirely on all of those. It wasn't entirely anonymous. It wasn't entirely used for transactions, but it's become a fantastic store of value, and that's kind of where it landed. Do you think that that's the correct story of Bitcoin? And do you think that crypto projects, is there a pattern of this, like shoot for the moon, you'll land amongst the stars? It's okay to kind of build towards like a three-pronged amorphous future, because if one of them hits, you could still wind up with a fantastic power law outcome.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I think it's the only way of doing things. In the sense of, it's kind of like people who there's one guy who will remain unnamed who like critiques like Elon's self-driving schedule. It's like he promised it an X date, and it only arrived like a year later. He sucks so much. and I'm like, like I think Elon is saying like Tesla or SpaceX, they turn impossible into late.
Yeah. That's
right?
a good one.
Yeah.
You'll take that every single day, obviously, in my view, obviously, right? I want to answer to your point. So the way I think about Bitcoin is maybe the obvious way, but it's digital gold, right? That is to say, it is infrequently moved on chain. It stores large amounts of value, and it actually serves some of the purpose of gold reserves, where like you sort of want to show on chain that you have it. It's almost like meant to be public in some ways, right? And then the various kinds of features that people have wanted to add over time to Bitcoin. The problem is that like gold should be as immutable as possible, and mutability is in conflict with, I mean, programmability is a good value and immutable is a good value, but those are like, fire and water, they don't mix, right? There's, you want a drink of water and sometimes you want a hot fire to keep you warm, but you don't want them in the same thing, then you get nothing, right?
Yep.
So immutability, Bitcoin's immutability, its stability and its predictability, think of it as locked, right? And then what happened was privacy went to like Zcash and zero knowledge, Tornado Cash, which is now legal again, and so on. And zero knowledge is booming. Zero knowledge is one of the big things that people are underpricing, I think.
Cool.
Biotech, arguably another, and so on. Then number two is programmability with smart contracts. That went to Ethereum and Solana and whatnot. Number three, transactions, as digital cash, that went to stablecoins, USDC, USDT. And then other kinds of things like storing data on chain and, using it as an oracle, that went to other stuff like Chainlink and other kinds of things. And then, basically other functions like on-chain data is NFTs, just like on-chain code is smart contracts, that went to NFTs. So all of these things that were initially contemplated did happen, just happened on other chains that could tolerate the risk, because, you have success and failures then, and Bitcoin couldn't tolerate that risk. Bitcoin was locked.
Yeah. Well, with the zero knowledge stuff, I haven't been tracking it as closely most recently. Are you waiting for engineering challenges to be hurdled? Are you waiting for just more code to be written? I understand that it's incredibly complex code, some of the hardest
hard code.
programming software
ZK
to write,
and quantum,
or is it more on the customer adoption side? We're ready for on-ramps of kind of the masses, but it's just going to take time for people to build the bridges to actually make these new ZK products just lovable and
Well, first, just to explain what zero knowledge is. Zero knowledge arguably is, and Vitalik's also made this analogy, ZK arguably is to crypto what the transformer is to AI, in the sense of it takes a bunch of things that were previously special case stuff and it puts it into kind of a common framework where you can, lots of special case subroutines can now be general case, to oversimplify. And what that means is you can develop ZK protocols that, for example, ZKYC, where they just prove what is necessary for a government to be satisfied that this is a real human being and nothing else, right? And that's necessary because look at these, these KYC attacks on Raj of Salon and other kinds of people, right? Like the modern form of KYC is where governments force companies to store giant honeypots full of sensitive information. And then the governments themselves are often hacked, like the OPM hack and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect of where ZK can come in and be the solution. Another thing is that ZK is actually used as a compression technology. So for example, ZK rollups, not just a privacy technology. And so this stuff is actually already there and it's being deployed and it's working. There's ZK chains and so on. It's one of those things where, is it consumer visible? Maybe not, but I think it's just a really important technology.
It might never need to be consumer visible, is what you're saying.
I mean, that's right. But what it does basically mean is there can be sort of magical things where you can prove what you need to prove without giving up anything else.
Yeah.
Right. You can
that's
prove
the way a lot of KYC stuff works right now. I scan my ID. Most people don't know that there is a machine learning algorithm with computer vision in there that's reading the ID and checking it with a database. People just know, hey, I scanned my ID and I got KYC'd. It could be a lot easier and it could be more resistant to hacks and leaks, right?
What you want is something like SingPass or Estonia's digital ID, where it's like an app on your phone and that's your ID card, and then that can do a zero knowledge handshake with something else, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like a piece of paper, like physical card.
How are you feeling about stable coins these days? How are you feeling about stable coins these days? I feel like there's an immense amount of energy and excitement, but they always feel a little bit misaligned with the folks who are like, let's get off the dollar. Let's, we wanted to move away from that system, and we're kind of maybe rebuilding it. How are you feeling about stable coins? Are you optimistic? Do they play an important role in your vision of the future?
Yes.
Cool.
Though, I think, so let me actually show you guys something. Ready? Here is a fun video.
Okay.
Can you see the screen there?
The stablecoin video is dropping right now. Let's see. Coinbase and Circle announced launch of USDC, digital dollar. Yes.
October 23rd, 2018. And so guess who's there?
Were you behind this? That's amazing. Lore. This is great.
There he is.
I remember this video. Yeah, I remember thinking like, oh, I don't really understand this, but now I do.
So you were, this is a long way of saying you were early and right.
You were super long stable coins, but I've heard it's hard to make money.
That's right. And in fact, let me just show you, just to underline, here is the market cap of USDC, which is now $60 billion.
Yeah, wow.
And on October 3rd, let's see if I can get the cursor. Bang. What's it say? October 3rd, 2018. Can you see that? 0.
Yeah. I can't see that, but I can see the broad chart. But congratulations for being early. You're always early. Where are we going in the future with stable coins? How important are they going to be? Because it still feels like there's a little bit of tug of war with like, we're staying on the dollar. We're not really moving to
and legacy financial institutions seeing that we're in a friendlier regulatory environment, seeing the product market fit of stable coins, now wanting a piece of the action.
Like when the Wall Street Journal reports like the dollar fell in value, like the stable coins also fell in value, right? And so it solves some problems, but not all of them. So what's your take?
Right. So, the term stablecoin obviously is historical because it was stable relative to Bitcoin.
Sure.
I think you could sort of separate that out into two things, like a fiat coin and a flat coin.
Totally.
Like a fiat coin is something that's an on-chain mirror of fiat off-chain.
Yep.
And a flat coin would be something that actually retained its purchasing power over time.
Yep.
And that's much harder to do because you'd have to maintain its stability against bread and PlayStations and whatever. And if there's an actual shortage of those things, then price might increase for no reason other than actual physical shortage. So, but keeping the historical name, stable coins are, so first, why are they useful? Well, at a minimum, they're better international wire transfers.
Yeah.
That alone justifies their market cap.
Totally.
That's like tens of billions of dollars in market cap because they just save you from $25. And more importantly, banks are only open like 9 to 5 weekdays, right? So like from 40 hours a week uptime to 168 hours a week, which is 24/7 uptime, that's worth a lot. Imagine if websites were only up 40 hours a week, right? Yeah. So just that alone, the ubiquity, internationalization, then you add programmability and so on. When people say, oh, why just put $1 on chain? That's why, right? That's why they're valuable, right? And the space is partitioned in an interesting way, and I think many other things will partition this way, into like a US and a global, right? Mm-hmm. Like the USDC coin or the USDC asset is like US regulated, and then USDT is like intentionally non-US regulated, right? Sort of like there's like Coinbase and there's like global exchanges and so on and so forth. I think that'll be a common partitioning of many kinds of markets. Yeah. And so that's a justification for why I'm bullish. But now onto your specific questions, I think that one of the things, once you've got something on chain, it can just be easily swapped, right? And so now that USDC is there, you're going to have probably every other fiat currency up there and what have you, because it's become so mainstream and whatnot. But when that happens, you get an interesting thing, which is similar to the launch of Google News in the mid-2000s. As you may recall, all these newspapers put their newspapers online in the late 90s and early 2000s. Yep. Then when Google News launched, it suddenly showed that the Des Moines Herald and the San Francisco Chronicle and NYT, WAPO, Miami Tribune, whatever, were all basically printing the same stuff. There was some custom stuff that they had in their own markets, but most of it was just reprinting the AP.
The Newswire.
Right?
Yeah.
Newswire. And you could see this on Google News. It's like 173 other outlets printed this story.
And it's all the same story every time,
Yeah. And that's because those newspapers, they had trucks and they had, used to say, never argue with a man who buys ink by the barrel. Now, never listen to a man who still buys ink by the barrel, right? Okay. Because, they're,
I love it.
Are you buying any ink? I actually like pencil and paper to write, but not to print, right? Certainly not newspaper.
Early days. We went through a lot of
early days.
Never fight with a podcaster who live streams for 20 hours a week.
Something like that. Exactly. Let's beat you on. Exactly.
Yeah, this is the modern version.
That's right. So point being, though, that they had these geographical monopolies that suddenly they put their stuff online and there was a delayed reaction. And suddenly they realized, wait a second, every newspaper's in competition with every other newspaper. And so, of course, all the local ones without any brand basically just all died. And only the national ones survived. And they became much more ideological. And the new partitioning of information space was on the basis of ideology, not geography. So you've got the, gym bros, and you've got like people who are interested in, I don't know, various political causes. You've got crypto causes. You've got things sectioned by vertical rather than geographic horizontal, ideology rather than geography. Okay. So the same thing is going to happen with assets. And the reason is, first, you've got these fiat currencies that are put on chain. And then we're nearing something which I call the DeFi matrix. The DeFi matrix starts with the observation that fiat can be swapped like Forex, but fiat crypto can also be swapped like USD BTC, and crypto can be swapped like BTC ETH. And of course, crypto can be swapped for NFTs and all kinds of this crazy menagerie of digital assets that are now out there. So you visualize this giant square of every asset that can be traded for every other asset. And there's amazing numbers of crazy financial machinery out there now that will basically do the complexity of finding buy and seller pairs, like Uniswap and market makers and so on behind the scenes for this swap. What that means is that whatever asset you have less need to get into a fiat currency. You can just hold that asset, and then when you want to, you just liquidate it for whatever other asset you want at some fee. Okay? What I mean by that is, what do people call it? What's a highbrow way of saying it when you sell your company? You get a
liquidity event.
Liquidity event. That's right. That's another term of talking about cash. Cash is liquidity. Cash is universal barter. Cash can be traded for anything. But now anything can be traded for anything. Which means there's less need for cash, right? And so all these countries will wake up one day and they'll find, wait a second, just like the newspapers, we had a geographical monopoly on our fiat currencies, but now we don't, and we're competing in this global marketplace of all these other cryptocurrencies as well as really big fiat currencies, right? And then they're going to have to compete, just like the information environment, you compete on ideology rather than geography. Then in the transaction environment, you have to compete on features, not places, right? So for example, privacy coins or smart contract coins and so on and so forth. You compete on the vertical as opposed to the horizontal of France coin, which is a franc, and Japan coin, which is JPY, right? And it's a funny way of putting it, but that's like what they are, right? So I'm not saying there isn't any utility to geography, but especially given that so many of these things, what have people done? All these countries have gone cashless, right? Cash, physical cash, was actually something that tethered people to a geographical area because you needed to actually hold it, and it was issued there and redeemed there and so on and so forth. Once you go digital, you don't have to use cash anymore. And many people have, for example, crypto cards where they can hold in one currency and spend in another, and it just Apple Pay or whatever just works, that people don't know, right? So stablecoins are an intermediate form that facilitates this transition from the fiat world to the pure crypto world, kind of like putting newspapers online was an intermediate form. And just like there was a whole battle in the 2010s where newspapers at one point felt threatened. Oh my God, I mean, not at one point, they still feel threatened, but they fought this whole battle of the bulge counterattack on social media, tried to take away your voice, my voice, everybody's voice, but they lost. You know what I call when Elon took over X? You know what I call it?
What do you call it?
X Day. It's like D-Day, right? All the good guys amassed $44 billion for like the Normandy landing. Boom, right? Like this, because it was still technically illegal. They were like, if you want your own company, why not build one or whatever to get free speech back? Remember those kinds of lines of argument prior to, right, 2022? And then Elon basically gathered the forces, and every tech guy, like some Marvel movie, put in a bill, 5 mil, whatever they could afford, pass the hat around. I mean, $44 billion in cash is like go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just funny passing the hat around, and Morgan Stanley puts in $13 billion in debt. It's kind of classic.
Yes. So every center right, centrist, center left, in some cases, person who just piled it, because Elon obviously was the man, but so many people backed him, right? And this was something where Thor landing with a hammer, boom, like this, right? Poof, all of these communists just fly back against the walls. All these wokes just defeated like this. And X Day, right? Now, what that actually also meant was a Tower of Babel kind of moment because Twitter no longer exists. There's X, there's Truth Social and Gab and whatever, all on the right. And there's Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads and TikTok on the left. And there's the crypto networks like Nostr and Lens and Farcaster and so on, right? So you have a Tower of Babel moment where Twitter has been shattered.
Anyway, this has been fantastic, Balaji. Thank you so much for stopping
You're welcome to come on and screen share with us.
Up next, we have Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz. But first, let me tell you about Ramp. Time is money, save both. Easy to use corporate cards, bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more, all in one place. Go to ramp.com to get started.
Ramp.
Very excited to talk to Chris. Obviously, extremely storied investor, top of the Midas list, early Coinbase investor, continual Coinbase investor. We got Brian Armstrong coming on later to tell his side, the founder journey of Coinbase. But Chris has been all over the place in crypto for a decade, 15 years, 20 years. I think he invested in Bitcoin back in 1994.
And right.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that we're having on today were early and right.
Yep.
Which is a good thing to be.
Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Also an early Soylent investor.
Yes.
Jordy, good to see you guys. Congratulations on all the success with the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Where should we start? Can you give us a temperature on the crypto markets? It's been up and down.
Come on, let him take a victory lap.
Take a victory lap.
Let him take a victory lap.
I feel like you get.
I know the job's not finished, but
they always twist your arm into doing podcasts when the market's down and saying, "Oh, you got to hold you accountable." And then where is Kara Swisher calling you when the market's up? You know,
that's a good point. By the way, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah. You sound great.
Okay, great. Good. I mean, it's been a long journey, as you guys pointed out. I think that we had a lot of challenges the last 4 years, regulatory challenges with the last administration, and that looks like it's trending much better now with the new administration. It's sort of more pro-tech, and I think we have a lot of momentum in Congress, and that's a big deal because that created a lot of headwinds. So that's great, and then also like the kind of core infrastructure, and I don't know if you guys want to talk more about it, but totally. So for example, one of the things happening right now are stablecoins are really taking off. So like last month, it was something like 2 trillion in stablecoin volume, which is more than trillion with a T, which is more than Visa. And so, quite a lot of volume. And a lot of that's due to the fact that the infrastructure, so Solana, Ethereum, and so forth, has gotten really good. Yeah. So you can now send an arbitrary amount of money anywhere in the world for under 1 penny in 1 second. But that took years and years of work, investment, founders, technical folks doing a lot of work. So that's great. And so there's a lot of good things. I think that, there's a lot of challenges too, but overall it's been fun.
Do you think that the narrative around stablecoins is still going to morph into micropayments for the internet? Ben Thompson was talking about this with MCP. It's not in the standard, but you could easily imagine that getting worked into the second version of the standard. At the same time, obviously just global remittances has always been a huge category. It is the one category that I used stablecoins for years ago. And it felt very real in that moment, even while people were saying, "Oh, this is useless." It felt like, okay, this is the value. But I'm interested in like kind of the next application of stablecoins and then the one after that.
Yeah, great. So I think just maybe briefly, the way to think about stablecoins is today we don't really have a global payment system or global financial system. We have 195 countries. Each one has many different banking systems. When you send money to another country, like I say, you wire money. Like actually, we've had this experience at the firm where we wire investment, and it ends up going through like a bunch of humans and paperwork. It's really just a mishmash of systems. And so the way to think about stablecoins is similar to how, for those who are old enough to remember, text messaging was like this like in the 2000s. You would send a text message and it would say, you don't have a plan to send to Canada, you got to sign up. And it was all these different systems. And then WhatsApp and FaceTime came along and they built this sort of what they call over the top global network, right? So think of sort of stable coins and blockchains as an over the top network. It's from day one, global, low fee, credibly neutral, programmable payment system that just sort of works everywhere. That's kind of the simple way to think of it. And so, as you mentioned, one of the obvious benefits is just cross-border, and that's where a lot of the uses are right now. And so, for example, like SpaceX has a program where they move, they'll sell a Starlink in, I think it's like some south of like Brazil or something, and then they'll immediately, use stable coins for so-called treasury management. This is one of the kind of growing use cases that folks like Stripe will talk about. Remittances, you're sending money back home. From the U.S. to whatever, some developing country, countries where the currency is volatile and they want access to dollars or euros. And then, as you mentioned, John, the idea that and actually, I encourage those who are interested to go listen to the Collisons. They were an all-in podcast a few weeks ago talking about this. What they're actually say they're really excited about is less the low fees and more the programmability, as you just described. And so you can so this is like one obvious thing is, invoice fraud. So people will send, these faxes type things. That's really old fashioned, where they'll say like, here's my wiring instruction. And if you've done this, you'll say like, please make sure you call first. But of course, calling doesn't work in an age of AI because it could be a fake voice. And so, what Stripe was excited about is that because blockchains are programmable, they can have a full kind of reputation system on top. So they know like this is a valid place to send money to for your invoicing system, right? So you can program it. As you mentioned, micropayments, right? Now that you can send money for 1 penny, that unlocks a whole bunch of use cases. So machine-to-machine payments, every time you're doing an AI API request, as you mentioned, MCP, right? So like why should MCP, I would expect, would have down the road a payment standard, right? And AI agents. So you imagine a world, which I think we're headed to pretty soon in a couple of years, where you have all these different AI agents running around. I'm advertising. I can program. I can write your essay for you. I can, do your homework, whatever. And they're all sort of advertising their services. And then you sort of imagine other agents coming along and negotiating and pennies getting transferred back and forth, and this big kind of, economic, kind of mishmash, like kind of collection, on top. So the web moves from like these kind of sign up forms to agents sending money automatically. And we think that would be most naturally powered by a global, low fee, programmable system like blockchains.
Yeah.
I'm super curious to understand how your guys' lobbying efforts have evolved over the past 6 to 12 months. We went from, a sort of a large coalition of people trying to basically, block crypto from getting real adoption and traction in the US to suddenly ETFs being approved and things like that. And I imagine that's kind of changed your guys' strategy on the Hill. So I'm interested to hear how that's evolved.
Yeah, so I've been doing, we sort of, I saw Mark Andreessen on you guys, I think it was a week or two ago. I watched that, and
Nice.
He was talking about a little bit. Mark and I have been very involved in this, and by necessity originally like 4 or 5 years ago, and then over time realized just how important it is to engage. They say in Washington, they like to say, if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. So you don't want to be on the menu. So I've been going sort of like once a month, and Mark has too, and really just kind of trying to explain our perspective, because we feel like the interests of startup, most startups don't have the resources to go to DC, right? And of course, big tech companies do, and big banks do, and all sorts of other big entities do. And so our kind of logic was that we're one of the few kind of organizations that has enough scale to have a government affairs team who represents the interests of startups. And so we go and we say, look, we represent small companies, and here's what they're interested in. So for example, they want to have clear guardrails and rules around blockchains. They want to have open source AI. That's another really important issue to us. Mm-hmm. Clear rules on like AI and copyright. And there's a series of things, having a single federal framework and not a 50 state laws on a lot of these things and so forth, right? And so we go and we kind of advocate for that. We've taken a bipartisan approach from the beginning. We think that's very important. I mean, look, just one is we think the way you really build industries is legislation. If you think back to the internet, that was built on the 96 Telecom Act. And had things like Section 230, which, you may know is now a contentious issue, had Section 2, I like to say if Section 230 had been, administrative guidance instead of legislation, it would have been a political football every 4 years. Mm-hmm. It was built into legislation. And so Section 230 is what enabled marketplaces, social networks, and so forth to build reliably on the internet. So we've always felt that both for AI and for crypto, we want legislation that provides clear rules, paths for innovation, and really eliminates or mitigates or eliminates, all the kind of bad use cases and bad actors. And so that's always been our approach. It's been bipartisan. That's for legislation, you need bipartisan, first of all. And secondly, like the Democratic Party has, like most people will sort of think, Republicans are pro crypto, Democrats are anti. That's not really true. Like we just had last week, a Senate it was a procedural vote on the stablecoin bill, and I believe there were 17 Democrats who voted for it, which is significant. And I think, our view has been we want to kind of, shift the Democratic Party back to the values of Obama and Bill Clinton when they were pro-tech, and not sort of the kind of blue sky thing, Democrat thing that happened in the last years.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about the lobbying is that I looked at the donation dollars that were coming from crypto aligned people and crypto funds, and it was split almost exactly 50-50. Like the entire crypto community really did go super bipartisan with the spend, and obviously the Republicans won, so it feels like a Republican issue like right now, but it doesn't feel like it's going to remain that way. On the issue of government, I'm interested to know, maybe stablecoins are a good example, but just general crypto adoption. How do you think about the adoption across government, B2B, or just direct to consumer? Because when I think about stablecoins, for example, there's people that want to pay people individually, but there's so many ways that you can just tuck stablecoins under some business. Like with the AI thing, if you get Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft using stablecoins in an agentic application, the user might never know that I'm paying a fraction of a cent to access a Wall Street Journal article. It just happens, and I'm not even aware. So, what are the key drivers for the different constituencies, and then the different applications, and how do they fit together?
No, that's a great question. And I have a broader kind of framework I'd like to talk about, which is sort of, I sort of like to distinguish technologies between what I call inside out and outside in. And so inside out are things that sort of start with established institutions, like AI to some extent is like that. You know, the iPhone was like this. It came out of Apple, a very established institution. AI came out of, Stanford and so forth. Whereas crypto very much, Bitcoin started at the fringes, right? And so, sort of like open source software, and there's, other kind of tech movements that started at the fringes, and it sort of worked its way in, right? So stablecoin started for the main use case was settling, crypto trades, 7 years ago or something. And then over time, you started to see more and more like, payment providers in Argentina, for example, and that, sort of more kind of moving to the center. Now Stripe, I think of Stripe is very much probably I think the smartest, a lot of people think the smartest, one of the, if not the smartest fintech company is all in on it. They did $1 billion acquisition of Bridge. To get, to ramp up their efforts. I think the main gating factor, like I speak to a lot of like what I would love to see is a world where you have banks and, asset management firms and every payment provider, as you described, John, like behind the scenes, it's just sort of, it's the substrate, it's the infrastructure, right? It's like HTTP or SMTP. It's just this thing that exists. A lot of them say we just want like that final, regulatory clarity piece, right? Because they want that assurance because they're risk averse. We just had 4 years of kind of lawfare against the industry. So that's why I think that's really like, honestly, like I probably spend more than half my time on that now. Like that's just kind of the key. There's two, and just to say there's two big kind of bills that we're advocating for. There's stablecoins. There's one called market structure that's just coming forward in the House now, which is also to kind of clarify more broadly on tokens. But I think that's the main thing right now. I think, but to your point, exactly, I don't think most people ultimately will think of even the word stablecoin. I think it'll be like digital dollars. That like for the average person, right?
It'll be an industry term like ERP. People interface with that, but they don't know.
Yeah. But we'll see like we have a fintech group at the firm that's not crypto. I don't know if you know folks like, I think you interviewed Anish and all those folks. And they like crypto, but they're not like crypto. And they'll tell me now, like it's become pretty standard in the fintech stack that people will use stablecoins.
Yeah. So let's.
You're like a 3-person startup, and like boom, you push a button and you got 190 countries. That's very different than the old days. Sorry.
I want to get your point of view on the competitive forces and dynamics right now, because we have startups, which there's entire subcategories. You have hyper decentralized, crypto companies. You have sort of hybrid companies like maybe Bridge that are kind of sitting in between fintech and crypto rails. And then you now have big institutional players that are coming in. Maybe they brought ETFs to market to start, and then now they're thinking about stablecoin applications as well. How do you look at the market, and what kind of advice do you give to portfolio companies that are trying to figure out who they are, whether that's fully decentralized or some type of hybrid or so on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that, the point is not for like decentralization and kind of this new architecture of blockchains for its own sake. The point is they have specific benefits. So like why would one build on a blockchain like Ethereum or Solana as opposed to a traditional, on AWS, like a traditional architecture? And the answer is when you build, and the way I like to describe it most simply is blockchains allow you to build digital services that remove the intermediaries. So you remove, so for example, stable coins, you have no intermediaries that are taking fees. You don't have the banks and the payment providers and the payment networks, right, that take all the different layers of fees. So that's an important benefit is you're building these, you could build social networks without fees. You can build games without fees. You can build AI systems without fees, right? Without fees, it's like very low, like a couple basis points. I actually have for those interested, I wrote a book, Read, Write, Own, and I have a chapter on take rates where I go through this in detail. But it's essentially you're going from like 30% in the App Store, 100% in Facebook and 50% on YouTube to like 5 basis points or something, right? So, or 2.5% for payments and so forth. So the first question is why would you want to build on them? The other one we mentioned before is programmability. You can do all sorts of cool stuff on top. And so I think to your question, I think it depends. Like ultimately, I think of startups as you want to work backwards. You want to say, what do you want to do for the world? What kind of service do you want to provide? And then you work backwards and you say, how do you want to build that? Right. In some cases, that means you want to build something on a blockchain, like a pure service, like a protocol, we call it, with a token and so forth. In other cases, you want to build more traditional software that may be like, for example, like you mentioned, that bridges between a bank and an asset manager and a blockchain system, right? So I think ultimately we think of it through that lens as kind of, now as an investor, I skew towards things, I like things with, for example, network effects, because it's just, they can be my career, I've found that network effects can be very powerful, right? You invest in something, it grows, it kind of has a natural kind of defensibility and kind of gets better as more people use it. So there's just kind of different lenses you can look at it. The last thing I would say is, to your listeners, I know you have a broad audience. I think that the crypto space right now, the real shortage we have is startup talent. In that there's a lot of obvious good ideas where there just aren't many people pursuing it. So I think it's actually the opposite problem than you might have in AI right now, where I imagine in AI, it's an amazing technology and deservingly people are excited, as they should be excited about it. But you probably for every idea have, 50 good startups pursuing it. In crypto, I think we're undercompeted. Like we have too little competition, honestly. So I would just say to your listeners, if you're a smart person thinking about doing a startup, I think there's a lot of white space right now.
If you're in AI, pivot to crypto. We heard it here first.
Or do both. We love AI. It is
my how are you? I'm sure you're perpetually going to be unsatisfied with the technological progress because you understand the full potential, right? Where are you at right now? We had Balaji on earlier. He's was very bullish on ZK proofs and what's coming down the pipeline there.
Prediction markets,
and there's obviously prediction markets.
That was cool. Feel like during the election, it was like, wow, this is no one was talking about this during the Bitcoin white paper, and yet crypto has created something that everyone gets value out of in one way or another.
Yeah, I think we are still, I think of these technology things always go in S curves. We're clearly still at the somewhere in the bottom of the S curve. Like I think there's just a lot more growth, and just like user base, there's something on the order. There's tens. Most of these applications I'm describing have, up to 50 at the highest end, probably 50 million users, which is 1% of the internet. So it's still very early. And Polymarket is doing incredibly well, but I assume it's still in that kind of sub 1% of the internet. It's not. And the internet has 5 billion people now, right? So we have a long way to go. I think a lot of the kind of core infrastructure is now, as of a year and a half ago, kind of good enough. I think a lot of these technologies have that characteristic where you have kind of, whether like neural networks only got good enough, I don't know, whatever, circa, let's call it, something in the 2010s because of the Moore's law on GPUs, right? And so, iPhones, once you had capacitive screens and whatever processors and so forth. I think blockchains, I think we no longer have infrastructure as an excuse anymore. Like now it's about building applications, about getting regulatory clarity. And I think we're pretty far along there. I think we have a long way to go fully exploring kind of the idea maze and all the different cool things you can do. And then bringing it to billions of people is the goal.
How have you been advising crypto emerging managers? One of my favorite, I'm going to kind of butcher the stat, but apparently like the sort of median crypto fund massively outperformed like the median venture fund for most of the last decade. And so I thought that was this beautiful narrative violation because, traditional venture would love to poke fun at crypto VCs, yet they were sort of like systemically outperforming the other party. But what kind of general guidance are you giving to somebody that maybe was an active trader and wants to get more into the actual kind of venture side of the game?
I've been investing in venture funds and crypto funds for a long time. I've just sort of, after I sold my first company. In fact, Mark Andreessen and I have done it together for a long time. and have been doing crypto funds since, gosh, probably 10 years and just consistently. And I'm still very bullish. And to your point, I think that's probably correct. Like on the, the data, like they've done, and I think it's just traditional finance in the sense of you have to, non-consensus, right? Like as much as we hear about crypto, it's still very non-consensus. A lot of venture funds just simply, maybe they'll have a little bit of Bitcoin, but they'll rule it out if there's tokens and things. You talk to funds, a lot of them will say we have a no crypto rule, sovereign wealth funds, so all the kind of giant pools of capital that fund the venture world, and so it's still kind of considered this kind of weird sideshow. Like obviously the past doesn't predict the future and so forth, and we don't know how things will play out, but it's still very non-consensus, I think, from a financial investing point of view, the broader crypto world. So I believe that's where the opportunities are in venture investing. Obviously you have to also be right. And time will tell, but I think it's still much more it's surprisingly non-consensus in the investing world, I think, to this day, despite the performance.
Can you explain a little bit of the dynamic of how venture fits into the life cycle of a new crypto company these days? Because there's liquidity available from retail in some cases. There's some companies that are going to be profitable very early because of their insane product market fit.
We had Elon from Pump On earlier, and that's classic example of a company that was able to be very efficient. And I think we've seen on the other side, you have companies like Hyperliquid that got out and have a token very early. So I'm curious, how you think of the capital life cycle.
Yeah, so let's see if I can answer that. So, like, one reason we started a separate crypto fund originally, like, I guess 2018, was so that we could, before that, I was doing like crypto investing, but it would always get these questions from the LPs and like, what is this? Is it equity? Is it tokens? And so create a separate crypto fund with the basic idea was we have maximum flexibility. And we went to the LPs and we said, look, this is going to be different. And here's the idea. And and a lot of them opted out. Some of them opted in. But we were very clear up front what it was. And so what we think of it is we can do everything from we buy Bitcoin or something just directly, which we do. People see our funds and they assume it's all venture. It's not. Like we do a lot of just buying like tokens that we think have upside. We also do we can do equity investments like a Coinbase, which is a classic equity investment. We have a bunch of those that the goal would be to someday IPO. They could be cash flow heavy ones that do dividends, like the ones you're describing, Jordy. Like maybe some of those, or maybe I don't know what their plans are. Pumped up, maybe they IPO, maybe they dividend, maybe they do buybacks. Right? If you have cash flows, you have a lot of options. And then the third one, which is actually one of our core ones, is you'll do an equity. A project will start as an equity investment, but then over time we'll launch a token, and the equity investors get sort of pro rata rights to those tokens. And that was sort of the new thing that we really wanted to lean into back when we started the crypto fund. That was a new idea that we helped kind of pioneer that, I think. And
that was like the warrant structure.
Well, it's basically it's very simple. It's a term sheet with two extra things. It has essentially token rights. And it can be a warrant, and there's different ways to structure it. And what's nice about that is one of the reasons startups work so well is that they're when they work is that the investors and the founders are fully aligned. So before that structure existed, I don't know how deep you guys want to go on this. There were these things called SAFs and these kinds of things where you do token purchases. And the problem is it created all these weird incentives where the founder would try to create a token just to do something. What we believe very strongly is alignment between the investors and the founders. And so there's sort of this equity structure with token rights or token warrants is one where if they decide they can stay an equity company and they can do, just do traditional kind of go for profits and things, or they can create a token or they can create two tokens or whatever is best for that service they're trying to create. And in whatever way that they eventually decide to, whatever business model they pursue, the investor will participate kind of pro rata alongside the founders.
What happens to the C Corp in that scenario where they launch a token, the token grows, and the community is, and like the asset is now controlled by the token, and the C Corp still exists? Are there roles for foundations and nonprofits and different transitions that could happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of times they'll just become like kind of one software provider in the network.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like, so for example, think of the Ethereum Foundation. I don't know if you guys know the relationship between Ethereum Foundation and Ethereum. Ethereum is a network. Ethereum Foundation, they help make a little bit of software. They give some research guidance, but they don't control the network. They don't, it's just like kind of in the same way there's just sort of a foundation that has some kind of a bully pulpit. sometimes they can have a separate business model. So like Uniswap is a decentralized protocol that we're investors in. That's sort of think of it as a decentralized New York Stock Exchange or something that's doing very well, multiple trillions in volume traded. And they spun off this protocol, and then they separately have a website that they operate, which is what the company does. And the website is now, I believe it's sub 5% of the volume on the protocol, but it's still 5%, right? And so they're just sort of one front end to it. And so I think that's probably maybe one of the best examples of what you're asking, John.
That makes a ton of sense. Jordy?
What are you expecting to see out of the kind of real world asset category over the next couple of years? It feels like this year, at least to me, it's felt like we're days or weeks away from some pretty high profile assets coming on chain. I'm curious how you think about the category broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I think of stablecoins as sort of the initial real world asset, right? So you have dollars in the bank account, and then the great thing about that, the kind of adoption there, and hopefully all the regulatory clarity we're getting, is that will be a natural stepping stone to, you have Robinhood talking about stocks, you have BlackRock talking about treasury bills. I think it would be nice if anyone in the world, I think it'd be good for the U.S. and I think it'd be good for the world if anyone in the world could buy 4.5% treasury, interest treasury bill, right?
Yeah, totally.
And have it secure and easy and permissionless and low fee. I think it's good for our the U.S. the popularity of the dollar, and I think it'd be nice for somebody who has a volatile currency to have access to those. Stocks, bonds, and then you can imagine all of these sorts of so-called dark pools. So, still a large part of finance is people using Bloomberg and calling each other. And a lot of that, like trading bonds and muni bonds and corporate bonds and things like that. There's a lot of interest from the banks to think about ways to use blockchains to create essentially marketplaces there, maybe permissioned marketplaces where only kind of certain participants can participate. For them, the benefit is, why haven't they created a network like a marketplace before? Because they don't trust each other. They don't want, like, who's going to create it? Is Goldman going to create it and JP Morgan's going to use it? They don't trust each other. They don't trust startups to do it because then the startup will start taking big fees. They've just sort of kept it informal and by phone. And so in a way, a blockchain kind of solves a political problem of getting these 20 entities or 100 entities who previously wouldn't kind of coordinate together. I think that's one broader way to think of blockchains is like, it's like if AI, is solving all the problems in the world that they need more intelligence, right? Blockchains try to solve the problems in the world that need more coordination, right? Or more, kind of collective action, getting a bunch of, blockchains are fundamentally social technologies, and it's about getting a bunch of, that's what money is ultimately social, right? It's getting a lot of people to agree on a standard and to use the same systems and tools. And so similarly with real world assets like that. And there's other interesting ones to your question, like we have one called Story Protocol, a project we're investors in that's putting intellectual property on blockchains and letting people, do capital formation and licensing and so forth around, so you create a new, a superhero theme thing and someone wants to make an AI remix of it. And like, how do they,
AI, really important.
For their rights? And so we think a lot about, like, in an AI world, like how will, creators get paid? How will IP work? How will money flow on the internet in a world with abundant content, right? And I think we think blockchains have an important role to play in that.
How would you like to see the industry and kind of the world collectively try to solve social engineering hacks? Feels like WorldCoin is one potential solution there, but I imagine there's a bunch of other sort of businesses that you could fund, and then a whole regulatory piece as well, which is we sort of force these large companies now. Balaji described it as like, to basically hold these, honeypots of data, and there's probably got to be a better way.
Yeah, a great question. So you mentioned WorldCoin. I'll just say briefly. So what WorldCoin does is what we call proof of humanity. So it's a way for you to get a cryptographic key that proves you're human. And the idea is in a world, as we're moving too quickly with AI bots and deepfakes and so forth, it's useful to be able to say, hey, I'm truly a human. And then, I can imagine a blue check on Twitter that actually cryptographically means you're human and not just that you paid $10. We think that would be useful. It's sort of a missing, kind of building block, so to speak, for the internet that I think we all want. And so one thing we think about is like, what are those missing building blocks? You mentioned zero knowledge proofs. Zero knowledge proofs are, I think, a really interesting cryptographic breakthrough that I think people underestimate in the broader world, how important they are. What they let you do is essentially prove things. So I can prove, like a bank needs to know I'm a U.S. citizen, let's say, or I'm, have a certain income or a certain profile, health data or so forth. What zero knowledge proofs let you do is I can prove that to the system without revealing any of that, like my actual, where it can basically send me a cryptographic kind of a game that says prove that you're a U.S. citizen, and I can prove it back without revealing all my name and all the other kind of stuff that might dox me, right? I mean, we just saw day after day we see these giant hacks, KYC hacks, so forth. Like at this point, you should just assume all of your information, sadly, has been hacked many times. And having Social Security as like your unique ID and password is just like a ridiculous system in this era, right? So and meanwhile we have these, we carry around these supercomputers with biometrics and advanced cryptography. Like, why aren't we using it, right? The problem is not the tech, the core tech. The problem is coordination again. Like, it's how do you get everyone to agree on what the standards are, right? And that's why I think blockchains can be important, because it's really all the pieces are there, but how do you kind of put them all together in a broad kind of standard or coordinated system?
Amazing.
That's great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
We'd love to continue for
we could go way longer. We need to have you back.
Awesome, guys.
And talk more.
Appreciate it. And congratulate. It's great to see somebody, a contrarian idea that a tech show that actually likes tech.
What a concept.
I'm very bullish on it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you
Thanks
soon,
for
Chris.
coming on, Chris. Have a good one.
Bye. We got Brian Armstrong next.
The gong is still ringing.
In the studio. The real gong rings much longer than the fake gong.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for Brian, let's tell you about AdQuick. AdQuick.com, out-of-home advertising made easy and measurable. Say goodbye to the headaches of out-of-home advertising. Only AdQuick combines technology, out-of-home expertise, and data to enable efficient, seamless ad buying across the globe.
It's out-of-home built different, John.
It is. It is. And we have Brian Armstrong here. Welcome to the stream, Brian. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's great to have you.
Much.
Welcome.
I don't even know where to start. I mean, we were kind of in the same YC batch. My first company was in YC Summer 12.
That was Soylent? Or which one?
Soylent. It's a weird story because I joined the company shortly after YC and I was in a different YC company. So, but that's a story for another day.
I give John problems all the time for not, tapping you on the shoulder and, demanding that you take an angel check in that era. But anyways.
Yep. Well, 2020 hindsight, I can assure you we were not like the hottest startup in that YC batch at the time. I mean, it was hard to actually raise our seed round, et cetera. But, obviously it worked out. It was not obvious, though.
Yeah. What was the incentive for joining Coinbase back during the YC days? Was it a full Bitcoin as a referral fee?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of stealing a page out of the PayPal book where, everybody would get about, I think you could, if you invited your friend and they onboarded, they got $10 of Bitcoin and you got $10 of Bitcoin. And at the time that was like about one Bitcoin. So
it's so crazy to think about.
Yeah. And there was a lot of people. I went around to like probably 1,000 or more people in the Bay Area at that time. And anybody I could find, I'd be like, hey, do you want some Bitcoin? Like I'll send it to you on my phone. And I'd try to get them onboarded to the Coinbase app. And I think when we started out, it was like $5 or $6 for a Bitcoin.
Yeah. So how do you tell the story of Coinbase now? I mean, it's such a huge story. Do you think about it in particular eras? Is the going public era a different, distinct era, or do you even map it to like the bull cycles and the bear cycles? Does that have a tangible feel in the Coinbase story internal to the company?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think of it in different. So Fred Wilson had this great thing he told me one time. He said, like, companies have multiple founding moments on the way to being a public company. Yeah. And that was definitely true in our case. So the first era was like Fred Ursum and myself in an apartment just grinding it out, like, 14-hour days, just doing everything ourselves, like answering customer support tickets, like trying to recruit people, trying to get anybody to join, writing code this ourselves, right? And so that was like the pre-product market fit, like how do we try to get something moving? And then you go through hypergrowth, right? And your problems totally change, which is like, how do we get a real set of leaders into this company? How do we not get hacked? How do we go raise more money, like build a real board? And so you go through this period of hypergrowth where we were like, we'd never managed anybody, but we were managing 25, 50, 100, 500 people. And we were hyper scaling, just trying to keep up with all the demand. And then, crypto went through ups and downs. You eventually, Fred decided to go found his own company, which was super successful, like Paradigm, and he's doing another company now. So I had to bring in an executive team. That was like its own experience with a bunch of infighting and blow-ups and drama. And I finally got an exec team that worked. And then we went public. And, Emily Choi is like our president and COO now. So she's like, it's multiple foundings along the way to get to these eventual outcomes. It takes like 10 years to be an overnight success, quote unquote.
Overnight success. We love overnight. We love 10-year overnight success.
We lost the overnight success button.
We have a soundboard and it plays overnight
every
success.
Time somebody says it took them 10 years to really be successful, we hit that. But what other industries have you looked to for learnings to kind of like build through these boom and bust cycles? Because it feels like you guys are acclimated to that now, but I know this is the case. Oil and gas is probably a prominent one. Were you able to pick up anything from outside of crypto to help you steer the ship through cycles?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, every company has different challenges, so I actually don't think ours are that bad. But one of the challenges we had when we were getting ready to go public was like our revenue was super unpredictable and volatile, right? Like we'd have a trading quarter where we would just blow it out of the water and we'd be like printing money, and then it'd be down like 70% the next quarter or something. And in the public markets, investors really love you to have these predictable revenue streams. I still don't to this day know why they're so fixated on that. It seems like they should be thinking about the growth potential, but they love the predictability of it. And so, yeah, we had to look at oil and gas. There's like some energy brokerage, like actually the traditional brokerages like NASDAQ and NYSE, like they have the same issue. If they can tell you, one of them told me one time, is like, if you can tell me what the S&P 500 is going to do next quarter, I'll tell you what our revenue is going to be. But of course, like if you can do that, you got it made in other ways. So, but whenever I feel like we're having a bad time, I always look at like the hard tech companies, right? Like the biotech companies in the public markets get beat up way more than we do. They have much less predictable revenue. Their revenue is pushed out way farther. All my friends who are working on hardware companies, I'm like, wow, they're really doing entrepreneurship. I'm like, they're always calling me up and like, I've got 4 weeks of cash. We're trying to raise money, and I'm like,
bail me out.
You've been trying to raise money like every month for the last 18 months, just living like 1 month to the next month, and like those guys have true grit. So in software, our margins are high, and it kind of covers up mistakes that we make. And we actually had revenue relatively early in our journey, whereas in biotech, you have to invest in it for 10 years to try to get your first dollar of revenue sometimes.
Yeah. There were a whole bunch of narratives around crypto back in 2012, even before decentralization, resistance to government control, anonymity, just faster payments, all these different things. What's the state of the union from your perspective? How would you grade the different executions across the original goals? Some of them have just kind of fallen by the wayside as we found different solutions to those problems. But what do you think we've knocked it out of the park on? And what do you think we still have a lot more work to do on?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ultimate vision for crypto was always economic freedom in my mind. In fact, that's the mission of Coinbase, is to increase economic freedom in the world. So that's like how to give people more self-sovereignty, more control of their money. It enables them to not only like live a freer life and have things taken away from them, but it's better for society, because if we have a society with good property rights and sound money and like rule of law and these things, you can actually try more things. Like if people are rewarded with the upside of their labor, they're gonna go try more ambitious things in the world. So you see that there's actually economists who measure across different countries like how high is economic freedom, and you see that in high economic freedom countries there's like higher GDP per capita, but there's also like less corruption, there's less war, there's lower infant mortality, like all these kind of downstream effects. So the ultimate potential of crypto is to get more economic freedom in the world. And we've been trying to push on that through a variety of ways. Like one way we've done it is by getting legislation passed in the US, or pushing on that. We had a big influence in this last election. The crypto voters showed up in a massive way. We had like 2 million advocates who raised their hand in the US saying they wanted to elect a pro-crypto Congress and candidates. We had like a couple $100 million in the Fair Shake Super PAC. And so we now have the most pro-crypto Congress that we've ever seen. And we're on the cusp of getting stablecoin and market structure legislation passed. The other thing is we've been pushing on our products, right? They have to be easier to use for the average person. Like the early crypto products were it felt like some computer scientists came from on high down the mountain and they tried to make this accessible to mere mortals. And like, that was never going to work. So the products are slowly getting easier and simpler for average people to use. And crypto is growing into these areas like payments and tokenizing securities. And it's not just like trading as a use case, right? So we're getting closer and closer, but ultimately I think crypto is going to update the entire financial system globally, and like the majority of all payments will run on these crypto rails. They're just faster, cheaper, more global, and that's how we're going to get more economic freedom in the world.
That makes a lot of sense.
Do you think the conversation around economic freedom over the next few years will shift away from the U.S. and more towards emerging markets who are adopting digital assets, but may face pushback from their governments and potentially even more aggressive way than we have in the United States over the past 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think the unmet need is higher in some of these other countries, emerging markets, right? Where people, like in Turkey, they're getting like 70% inflation a year or something. It's just like, it's devastating to their entire economy. People have very high demand for the dollar and then Bitcoin. Same thing in Nigeria, et cetera. Now, some of those markets are going to be very resistant to it, like especially if the government is not fully aligned with the people's interests. Like the government wants to run their fiat currency because then they can kind of print money and abuse it. And, it's one of these kind of original sins of like fiat currency, right? So, or like some of these markets have capital controls, right? Like in India. So I think the governments will be somewhat reluctant to embrace crypto in some of these places, but the average person will love it. Like the people are demanding it, they're rushing toward it. The governments are a little hesitant, and so in democratic countries, it'll be allowed because more people will vote for it. But in places like China, they're really cramping down on it. I don't think North Korea is going to add it anytime soon. So it's a little bit like the internet, right? China has the Great Firewall of China. North Korea has their own private internet. And so some of these like really corrupt regimes, I think they'll try to crush crypto, but in most places in the world, it'll happen.
North Korea even has their own Linux distribution, Red Star Linux.
Did they? I didn't know that.
They gave it a cool name. I mean, you got to admit it's a cool name.
It is a cool name. I want to talk about Base. Obviously, it's powering a lot of consumer crypto use cases right now. Like, how did that come about? What has it been like incubating something like that inside Coinbase?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me about that because they're always surprised that like a relatively big company can still innovate or whatever. But I think the way that I can't take too much credit for it, by the way. The biggest thing that I did was we have a very entrepreneurial culture, different people we've brought in. And Jesse Pollock came to me at one point and he was like, hey, I want to work on a new chain. And I was like, cool, like take a small team, go run at it, like 2 pizza team or whatever, like 5 people. And I had no idea if it was going to work, but the biggest thing, he deserves all the credit, to be honest. The only thing I did was I kind of shielded it from the rest of the organization a little bit and just gave them time to cook. And he went through like 5 or 6 iterations, and I saw a couple of these along the way, and I was like, honestly, I have no idea if this is going to work. And it turned out to actually really hit. And so if there is like a secret to this, which I don't know if it's a secret, but it's like you have to allocate some percentage of your budget to these venture bets and make them small bets, because you want to have 2, 3, 4 people like working on it, kind of like a YC company, not like don't put 100 people on it or something. It's going to be like a big bureaucratic thing. As long as they're small bets, you can tolerate like 75% of them not working out, and once in a while something hits and it pays for all the rest of the bets. I mean, it's kind of like having a venture capital internal at the company. So we actually set up this thing called we call it like Next Bets. And twice a year, anybody in the company can come pitch. It's like a group of people, we call it like internal venture capital. And they're basically the people who run different product groups, but there's also some really kind of like smart young engineers, et cetera. Basically, if any one of them raised their hands and said, I want to fund that out of their budget, then you're greenlit to go do it. You don't have to get a unanimous yes. You just need one person to say yes. And there's actually some pretty big, like USDC, I will tell you, I actually voted no on USDC, which was a terrible. And now it's like almost $1 billion of revenue or something for us. And I voted no because I was like a little skeptical. I didn't think it was like decentralized enough or something. But luckily, somebody else on our team voted yes, so it got funded, and it turned out to be a massive thing. So it shows you how much I know.
That's incredible. I want to talk about putting stocks on chain. You go back to that original like Peter Thiel lecture in the 90s talking about maybe we could have a digital dollar that's not backed by gold or the treasury, but actually backed by stocks. Is there a world where that happens? What needs to happen? Is there a world where Coinbase shares are securitized on chain? And I know you probably can't give like forward guidance around that, but like, walk me through the changes that would need to be made, and is that even a good idea in your mind?
Yeah, well, just starting first with that PayPal point that you made. I mean, there's a great book, I think it's called PayPal Wars. I believe it's about the founding of PayPal. And, there was a lot of like that libertarian ideology of like economic freedom was in the founding team. As you can imagine, they went on to do many other things. And I think like in many ways, crypto is fulfilling the vision that the early PayPal team started with around economic freedom. And the main reason I can think of for that, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. They got acquired by eBay, et cetera. The team changed in some of the motivations. But like at the end of the day, nobody wanted a US company to run the global financial system. Like if you were the Indian government or a random person in some country, like do I really want to put all my money in some US company? But if it was a decentralized protocol that nobody controlled, like kind of like the internet, it's like, okay, we'll all kind of integrate with that. And so Bitcoin was like the key innovation, I think, that unlocked that opportunity. You also asked about like kind of tokenizing securities. And I do think that's an exciting area. We're pretty interested in that as well. It's like the trading of stocks is just one more area of financial services that could be improved by crypto. I mean, as an example, there's a lot of people around the world who want access to US securities, but they don't have a simple way to open a brokerage account and track that. So it's like the international access would be better. You could get like perpetual futures markets spun up for these stocks, which would give traders more leverage. You could do 24/7 trading. You could do fractional shares. So I actually think like most traditional securities are going to get tokenized on chain in the next 5 years. We've been working a little bit with like the SEC task force on this and trying to find the right path to do it. So it's something we're interested in, but yeah, obviously nothing to announce today.
Where are you getting the most leverage from AI internally? I can think of a bunch of different potential applications, but I haven't seen you do online virtue signaling about it yet, like other certain CEOs have. But I'm curious, what you're excited about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I think we're doing a lot of the current best practices that most people are doing with well-run companies, and then there's a couple areas on the horizon that are more crypto specific that I'll tell you too. So I mean, the basic ones you probably know. It's like we onboarded all of our engineers to Copilot and Cursor and everything like that. So we got 100% of them onboarded. That was good. Our customer support, I think like maybe 60% of inquiries are being answered by AI now, which is really good. We also, for a long time, been building AI models around fraud prevention and like detecting risky transactions. But you can, obviously, like any process within the company that has a clearly defined input and output, you can train a model on, and like generating compliance reports. Like so we're trying to integrate it everywhere. The ones that are a little more on the frontier or like crypto specific for us. So one is that I guess people are calling it agentic commerce, right? Which is like, your agent is increasingly kind of like your assistant, and it might need to book you a ticket to go somewhere, or it might need to get through a paywall or something. Like if you're like, hey, go read all the research papers from Nature on this topic and give me a report, like, okay, those cost money to ingest it. And so AI agents are going to need to have a wallet to go pay for stuff. We think that crypto will be the backbone of that. Like USDC on Base is starting to be adopted by some. We actually released this open source thing called Agent Kit, which makes it easy for any LLM to have a wallet. And we're working on a couple of checkout type solutions with other players that we'll announce soon, where the AI agent can actually get through the checkout flow in many of these e-commerce sites and pay with USDC on Base. So I think agentic commerce will be a big one. I think it's also, we're going to get like AI agents that can be kind of like your RIA, like your registered investment advisor, or almost like your trading bot. So imagine like you're in the Coinbase app and you kind of tell them, hey, I want to put like $1,000 or $10,000 something into this account. And you're talking to a trading bot and you're like, just go make me money. I don't know. Like,
don't make mistakes. Tell it, make me, I joked about this before, 10% compounded return daily. Don't make mistakes.
Don't make mistakes.
Yeah. And it may have some questions for you, or like it may make mistakes. And like, there's a lot of details to figure out, but I think having a trading bot, like do a lot of that for you. And it's like, hey, like if it goes up a lot, lock in some gains, so I don't regret it later. Like you can give it kind of abstract concepts like that, and it knows how to make the limit orders for you or whatever.
Yeah. How do you think that, how do you imagine that type of capability really being dispersed? Because I mean, obviously there's people with, trading bots today, and I imagine some of them are so effective that they just say, well, we don't actually want to release this because we should just use it ourselves. but it sort of could potentially tie into this dynamic between closed source AI and open source AI. And is that, do you think part of Coinbase's opportunity is to make sure these types of tools are available to as many people as possible versus just a handful of traders?
Yeah, it's so we're not doing prop trading on our own balance sheet. So we're not like trying to be a hedge fund or something with a proprietary algorithm. So our goal would be to like make this available to as many consumers as possible. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of adjacent to financial literacy, right? Like many people might come in and be like, yeah, I want to make like crazy returns. And this thing can kind of tell you, well, okay, that's pretty high risk. Like, why don't you like dollar cost average into this diversified portfolio over time, and like that might be more in line with your risk appetite. But if you want to take 10% of it and try something more high risk, like so it can teach people about these concepts, and while also doing what they ultimately want to do, what they would have done anyway in the app, but it's just making it easier for them.
Totally.
Can you talk about the extortion attack, how you handled it? And I'm particularly interested in going forward. There's a lot of tools in your toolkit. You can throw more money, more people, more technology at the problem. What's the next few years look like in terms of beefing up security?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had a really good track record on security at Coinbase over the last 12 years. And even in this attack, we didn't see any private keys or funds accessed directly by the attacker. So what unfortunately, they were able to do is they were able to bribe some of our customer support agents and to share with them like personal information on customers, like name, address, et cetera. And they want this information, attackers want this information because they want to text people, call people, try to socially engineer them and to get them to send their money. And so unfortunately, they were able to successfully do that with a handful of customers, which we've reimbursed 100% at this point. And then they sent us this demand once we were, they realized they'd been found out and customers were kind of getting educated about this. They sent us this demand for $20 million, or we're going to release all this information. And it was an interesting moment. We came together and thought about it. And, on the one hand, we could have paid them the money, right? But we talked to a bunch of security researchers and people, and they were like, there's really what typically happens in these cases is if you pay the extortion, they're just going to come back in 3 months and extort you again. Yeah. And it's like, do we really want to be in this situation where we're like funding their next attack and like rewarding this kind of behavior, or do we want to try to create a deterrent to this kind of behavior? So we decided to flip it. And as you probably saw, we put out a $20 million bounty for any information leading to their arrest and conviction. And that's been kind of a crazy experience. I mean, just as one data point for comparison, after 9/11, the US government put out a $25 million bounty on Osama bin Laden, and we put out a $20 million bounty on these guys. So crazy. We had like maybe 5,000 like tips or inquiries like come into the email that we put out there. Most of it was junk, and we kind of whittled it down. There's about like 70 or so credible leads, I would say. We always have to be a little careful because some of these could be like the threat actor themselves sort of trying to throw us off the trail or run down some wild goose chase. Some of the other people sending in tips or leads are like other threat actors who kind of have beef with these guys, or they're there's kind of like no honor amongst thieves, right?
Yeah.
And so which is fine with me, but it's
I really enjoyed the I saw the video that you put out, and I enjoyed imagining the dynamic of the thieves, sitting around a table, realizing that the sort of game theory of who's going to turn in who. It was a nice visual.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we wanted to create, was a real deterrent here. It's like if you're going to attack our customers, you need to look over your shoulder and always wonder like who's going to turn me in, or who did I interact with in my entire life who might have known about this, who's going to turn me in. So anyway, I can't say too much more. We're working closely with law enforcement, but we're going to run down those leads and hopefully get a good result. I mean, you asked about beefing up security too, I think. And
just kind of going forward, you can imagine let's hire more people, better people. Let's throw technology at this. Let's monitor comms and where data's flowing. Is this more of a technology issue or a talent issue or an oversight issue or policies? Like how do you see investing in the next round of security?
The thing that popped into my mind, the way that you're already leveraging AI, is there's a world in the future where a more secure CX function would be entirely code. Right. And you wouldn't, it'd be much, you could create an environment where
or at least AI oversight of everything, of every interaction. But yes, I'm interested to hear what your take is.
Yeah, well, it's a great point. I mean, the 60% of inquiries being answered by AI now, I mean, they're not going to get bribed. I mean, there are other threat vectors with AI too, right? Because people are always trying to jailbreak these agents and things. So there's not a perfect solution, and I don't think we're still going to have like human in the loop on a lot of things for a long time. Yeah. But yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste. Like this was definitely a good moment for us to go implement a bunch of changes, and we mobilized a team of about 300 or 400 people right away that just went into overdrive, kind of trying to lock down a lot of these systems. A lot of it was not just our own systems. There's vendors that we work with that we needed to push them to hit a higher bar as well. We did relocate some of our customer support operations. The ones that got targeted the most were these overseas contractors and things like that. And you can imagine like some of the money being offered as bribes that would have been like pretty impactful even in the United States if people were there. Yeah. And we need to have 24/7 coverage, et cetera. So it's not a perfect solution to like just move it all in the US and pay people more. Like it doesn't 100% solve it, but we are relocating some of those support operations and then essentially just hardening our systems. Like luckily we had some good controls already which limited the scope of it, but we obviously didn't do enough. And so we've got to keep investing in that.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for younger builders, maybe the younger version of yourself? We had Chris Dixon on the show earlier today, and he said that crypto, one of crypto's biggest problems now is just a lack of talent. There is talent here, but it's probably, could have 10 times more to create a lot of great outcomes. I'm curious if you feel the same way around kind of talent in the industry today.
Yeah, well, I think we've never had it easier actually recruiting great people into Coinbase. I think there is like a great, partly that's due to our scale, right? Startups have to really fight for talent. But I think if you look at like the top 5 most exciting tech trends in the world right now, like my 5 would probably be AI, crypto for increasing economic freedom and all that, brain-machine interfaces, fusion energy and longevity, I think is also in no particular order, by the way. Like there's a biotech company I co-founded called New Limit, which is working on epigenetic reprogramming, which is really cool. It's a longevity company.
We talked to the founder. We were blown away. We came away extremely excited by that conversation.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, so I think to me, it's like, how do we accelerate progress?
Sure.
And I think the smartest people from a talent point of view, like the smartest kids up and coming, people, whatever, they all want to work in things that are going to change the world. So like, those are the top 5. And, I think like there's actually a pretty incredible amount of talent in crypto. It's like, you just got to go try ambitious bets and be okay with some of them not working. Like, I think sometimes people think that, well, Coinbase started and now it's big, and so they're just a success. And it's like, no, that's not true. Like we're trying these venture bets all the time. Like I told you about USDC and Base. Yeah. I mean, there's others that didn't work, right? Like we launched Coinbase NFT and it was pretty much a flop. Like we launched Coinbase in Japan. We invested all this money and time, like didn't work for a bunch of reasons I can tell you if you want. And we shut that down. And so we're constantly like, stay hungry, stay foolish. Like we're trying new ideas a lot, and you have to be okay with like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 just not working.
What about the Super Bowl ad? Was that a similar one person green lights it, and who greenlit it, and what was the story with the QR code?
Yeah, well, as usual, like success has many fathers and mothers, but it partially came out of a rushed, like a short time, time constraints breed creativity, right? So we actually didn't. I think by the time we bought the ad, we didn't have enough time to like go film something for months and months, and so the team just got really creative, and I don't even remember who it was in the meeting, like our CMO, and there was an agency involved, and it was a collaborative effort where someone was like, well, what if we did kind of like a direct marketing type campaign where we want people just to install the app, but you can never measure the result of most of these brand ads, right? You're always like, I don't know, did it drive revenue or not? And nobody really knows. So we're like, well, we could actually measure how many people just like scan it and sign up if we just put a QR code on the screen. So I don't remember who said it actually in the room, but it worked. It was cool.
Yeah, and you tracked the ROI and it was positive?
Okay, so that's actually a very complicated. We looked at this for you with the exact details, but long story short, like, so our site actually crashed because we got about like 20 or 30 million visits in 20 seconds.
Oh my God.
And we knew there was going to be a big surge, and so we had like, I think the first page loaded and it was heavily cached, but then like 20 million people started going through the sign-up flow, and like everything shut down. So we had to email a bunch of them later to actually come back and finish it. Long story short, so we lost like probably about a third of the value in just like overwhelming demand that we unfortunately couldn't scale to, but it would have been very profitable. It was still profitable depending how you count it.
The fact that we're talking about the ad today means something.
Very memorable.
Yeah,
Very
the brand
memorable.
value alone maybe paid for itself, even with none of the direct revenue.
I have one last question, then we'll let you get out of here. And feel free to just take it as like meta commentary on the nature of the question. But who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
So the official answer is it doesn't really matter, because like the idea stands on its own. And so if anybody ever comes out and we find out who it is, like in their will or whatever, but the unofficial answer, I think, is probably some combination of like Hal Finney and Nick Szabo and maybe one other person, but that's my guess, is that it was a collaboration between those people. And but ultimately it doesn't matter. And Hal Finney is frozen at Alcor, but he's no longer living, so we don't but maybe if Alcor actually works, which is a big if, in the future we could bring him back to life, we'll find out.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
We'll have him on the show then.
Yeah, we'll have him on the show. We'll have him on the show.
Yeah,
that'd be fantastic. Jordy, any other questions?
No, this was great.
This
We'd
was
love
fantastic.
to have you back
Thank
on
you
again
so much.
soon. You're our first public company, Fortune 500 CEO.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks for doing this. This is a big milestone for us. We really appreciate it.
Well, I love that you guys are championing tech, and the enthusiasm is palpable. So I get to see your clips all over.
Enthusiasm? What are you talking about? Enthusiasm.
We're gonna need a bigger gong. We're gonna need a bigger gong.
We're gonna need a bigger gong. Thank you.
It's
for
great.
stopping
It's
by.
great having you on, Brian. And
All right.
thank you for the work that you do. We'll
Talk to you soon.
See you guys soon. Bye.
Cheers.
I love
Great
hitting
hit,
the gong.
John. Great hit.
The gong it's working wonders. Well, next up, we have Dan from Farcaster coming in the studio. And big news, you can watch TBPN on Farcaster. Someone built a Farcaster mini app.
Which is a very cool, novel sort of experience that you have on Farcaster.
Yep.
People can create kind of sub apps within the app, and they live in the feed.
Yeah,
so
let's bring Dan in.
I think it's Jamie
How you doing?
Hoffman who built this for us.
Good to see you guys.
Dan, what's
Good to
going
see
on?
you.
Are you talking about the pirate feed of TBPN?
Yeah.
It's not a
Authorized
pirate feed.
reproduction
No,
on
it's
Farcaster?
authorized.
As long as it has our
We're authorizing it
ads
right
on
now.
there, we're happy.
It's authorized. Fully
You guys are like the
authorized.
Grateful Dead. Anyone can record the episode as long as the ads are on there.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
It is fascinating because I remember, when Farcaster dropped, it was like very much like it looked a lot like Twitter back then. But you look at the trajectory of the two platforms, and now like you think about like, oh, you can build a mini app that like repurposes TBPN, and like that is something that's completely not on anyone else's roadmap, and the product's evolved in a very, very interesting way. So, anyway, can you just give us kind of the update on like how things are going? What is the current pitch for Farcaster? Where do you see it going? And kind of take us through a little bit.
Yeah,
of
and
history.
I have to say,
please.
Dan and I were neighbors. We
really?
lived on the same street.
No way. Very cool.
And it's just been amazing to watch you build Farcaster in such an intentional way from the very beginning. I think you kind of had, I don't know if you had a master plan, but you guys seemed to have this pace of building, but also like patience and just like long-term thinking the entire time. So it's been awesome to see.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I wanted to point out that I am the almost last person in the group chat that started the MOZ podcast back in the day that's been on your show. Antonio has not been on your show yet.
I know
we missed him. We missed Antonio today. That was a miss by us.
I'm just going to say, I'm
invited him.
so happy I'm on this show before Antonio.
Bragging rights forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
open invite to Antonio.
Yeah, so Farcaster, 5 years in this year. When we started Decentralized Social, pretty contrarian.
Yep.
I think Elon changed the dynamic a bit in the sense that all of a sudden people got interested in building alternative versions of Twitter. I think we've tacked more into crypto over time. Mm-hmm. And so I think where we are today is we're decentralized social network, but it's targeted for crypto native. folks, right? So there's a built-in wallet and mini apps, as you point out. And so if you want to do fun things in crypto, you use Farcaster. And we're increasingly making that happen in the sense that we support a bunch of different chains. So you can use Ethereum, you can use Base, you can use Solana. I think we're going to add other ecosystems over time. So if you can kind of think of like, if you've ever had to do something in crypto where your friends tell you, oh, you got to get into this, you got to mint this, or do whatever thing that you're trying to say, you could just get on Farcaster and it's like 2 taps away. And then there's no complexity around switching chains and bridging and gas and all this other kind of stuff that if you talk to like the average Web 2 founder, it's like the UX that's acceptable in crypto is crazy. And so, 2025, we finally actually have the infrastructure to be able to like build decent consumer experiences. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Do you think you ever loop back around and go back into crypto non-native folks and tuck some of the crypto features under kind of like a stablecoin wrapper or something that like abstracts it away over time, because you've gotten that like core fire going, and then you need to turn it into like a raging fire, and people. I guess the meta question is like in 10 or 20 years, does the average consumer just in America, does everyone become crypto native, or does crypto native cease to be a concept because everyone just is?
I think it's probably more ceased to be a concept in the sense that I think stablecoins are working. So we do all of our weekly rewards. So we pay out $25,000 a week in our version of X payouts. It's a little bit broader base, and you can be a much smaller account and get it. We do that with stablecoins. So we do that every week. Works perfectly fine. We didn't have to integrate any other fintech provider. Just every user has a wallet. We're able to stream stablecoins to them for a ridiculously cheap amount in terms of like fees. So there's no middleman. So that's for sure working. I think so. We originally tried to do this whole thing where we were using crypto under the hood, but the whole point is like we're using it as a technology, not the kind of forefront. And I think that the reality is 2022 left crypto with a pretty big black eye with like FTX and a bunch of that other stuff. And so I think there are a bunch of people that I think otherwise are pretty intelligent and I would say reasonably open-minded, but when you talk to them about crypto, they froth at the mouth in terms of, it's all scams and grifts. And look, there are plenty of scams and grifts. It's a reputation that it's earned over time, but I actually think there's plenty of good stuff being built and increasingly. And so I think stablecoins is probably the thing to highlight in the sense that that's just been chugging along, right? And where did stablecoin start? Tether was a scam and a grift that for 10 years everyone kept saying it's on the verge of exploding, right? And it's now the most profitable business in the world. I think it's like they make like $80 million per employee. And so stablecoins have taken a while to bake. The infrastructure is finally there where it's like, now Stripe's in it, right? So it's like Ramp, one of your sponsors. So I think like stablecoins are just going to make crypto way easier. And then I think that there's this concept of embedded wallets, which you may have heard of, but like there are a bunch of providers. We use a company called Privy, and basically I think over the next 3 or 4 years, like every app, whether it's like a kind of fintech app or consumer app, will have built-in wallets. They probably will use stablecoins. Now, whether you can buy like fart coin or whatever meme coin in your Bank of America account, probably not. But I do think everything will get kind of like crypto enabled. And to the degree that you're using a more crypto forward product like a Coinbase or a Robinhood, or like a completely crypto native product like Farcaster, I think that's just like more of a personal preference.
It's top of mind for me. Yesterday you launched Farcaster Pro, a subscription. You brought the 10K NFT collection back. Talk through the whole process there. Why use kind of that mechanism, and it sold out. So it sounds like a cause for celebration.
Yeah, as Kobe would say, job's not finished. So I think like good progress. I mean, we sold 10,120 subscriptions with stablecoins in a little less than 6 hours. The 100% of the revenue we're generating, so this is kind of like for the protocol, is going back into creator rewards. So effectively, we've doubled the amount of like weekly payouts we're going to do for the next year.
Awesome.
And I think you had Chris on earlier, but this idea of like a zero take rate network, I think is pretty powerful. And going back to your question, John, of like how do you actually get out of the like crypto native and move towards a broader base, is just like most social networks you use today. What percentage of the value are they capturing? Like, Meta's market cap's pretty high. Like they're capturing a lot of that value. I think that the way for protocol-based social networks, and specifically ones that use crypto for the economic plumbing, the way for them to win is to have it be as close to zero take rate as possible. And basically, you by participating on a crypto social network, one, or decentralized social network, you actually own your audience. You can't get your like links nerfed. Like you guys are building like an amazing media brand. If you lost your ability to do streaming on a couple of the major platforms tomorrow, that would hurt your growth. And so the idea of like actually having a social network that you can be guaranteed to have direct access to your audience, I think that's
built different. We would just mail everyone a DVD every day. Easy.
Daily.
Problem solved.
Daily DVD.
Daily DVDs.
With stablecoin payments.
With stablecoin payments. I want to know about some of the economic incentives on a social network. It's been like the micropayments thing has been floated around. Is there a world where with AI slop, we need to be charging people to post, or can just algorithmic feeds kind of sort out the wheat from the chaff? Does any of that make sense? Are there any new trends in kind of like the design of a healthy social network that has high, I guess, not just high retention and ARPU, but also maybe high NPS? Because the classic thing with a social network is like it's printing money, but everyone says they hate it.
Yeah, so I think that's a stated reveal preference. Where
exactly, I agree
printing
with
money,
that.
people are they
totally,
actually love it.
Totally, I completely agree. So yeah, what is your
But I
deeper
actually
take?
think that you bring up a great point, and we are for sure at the forefront of this because if you know anything about crypto and people think there's an economic incentive, you bring out a lot of coin operated users, right?
Yep.
I think that any version of pay money as solely a mechanism for like, there's some version of quality or non-bot like behavior, not going to work. I think any version of I prove that you're a human, well, you're proving you're human, but I could go use ChatGPT to write the responses. So like, I think this is an extremely hard problem. If you actually go look at like Meta's 10Ks, like they specifically say that like they are the biggest and best in the world at this, and this is still an extremely hard problem for them to solve. They estimate something like 10% of like all users are potentially like spam or
wow.
Or, is it still?
That's
it's
wild.
But I think it'll be kind of a variety of tools, right? So I think economic activity is really hard to fake. Like one thing we had yesterday is a bunch of accounts paid $120 to a protocol, no refunds, right? Like stablecoins, nice thing is like you can't charge that back. Whether they're a bot or not, that money is now going to an algorithm. And this is where I'm actually a big fan of algorithms. Now, maybe algorithmic choice we could talk about, but the algorithm, if you design it right, is going to reward the interesting posters, the best posters, and you're extracting revenue from the bots. So I do think charging is actually a good idea. And then I think algorithms are the way to actually, as you point out, wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
How do you see crypto long-term as a funding mechanism for creators, artists? I mean, we had Ben Pasternak on earlier today to talk about, his vision for Believe, and it's, you people are using it to create meme coins. They're also using it as a, funding, funding mechanism for different projects. And I bring it up because we've talked about, we had Chris Best from Substack on maybe a week or so ago, and there's this idea that like people subscribe to Substack to get value in the form of content, but it's also a mechanism to just support somebody to just do interesting things in the world and be able to spend all their time, thinking about a specific area or sector. And it feels like there could be some element, I could imagine a world in the future where Farcaster is powering that type of activity. Is that correct? Incorrect? Is that a problem space that you think about?
Yeah, although to Substack's credit, I think they're doing better than the vast majority of Web 2 in the sense that I think what they take 10%, and like YouTube, I think what is the 70-30 cut in terms of I think they take 70% and you get 30.
Yeah.
Right. So like we're improving in the Web 2 spectrum. I think what crypto does in a world where the UX is good and it's pervasive, I think these are like embedded wallets with stable coins. You just start competing things down to zero, right? Like the ability for the platform to take a cut of payments, I think drops pretty significantly. Yeah. And what the platforms that do take a cut, they are going to say, hey, I'm getting you distribution, right? If you go on an app like Substack, then you talk to Substack newsletter writers, they're getting a lot of their subscribers these days from the Substack app. So that's value that Substack is providing. I think where crypto is interesting is that, like basic payments are like, you're talking like 10% improvement, like marginal improvement. And I think where you're looking for is like 10x improvements.
Yeah.
As you're pretty aware of the space and Believe is a great example of this, is like, I think capital formation, fundraising with big quotes around that, because obviously that's a pretty loaded word, but the ability to kind of like internet flash mob money into a certain thing, whether that's a meme coin or like a GoFundMe equivalent or a Kickstarter. Actually, someone built a mini app with stablecoins called Crowdfund on Farcaster. Basically is Kickstarter, right? Like you use a smart contract, you put your USDC like stablecoin in, and if it hits the funding threshold, it's unlocked. So
it makes sense. It makes so much sense
as 10 years ago. Now it's someone vibe coded over 3 days, right?
Yeah, it makes so much sense as a mini app, because in many ways people would just go to GoFundMe, create this thing, and then take it to social to promote it. And why doesn't it just exist natively in the product?
And I think the other thing that you have is like the liquidity, in the sense that I'm not fragmenting. I don't fund my GoFundMe wallet over here, or I have to like connect this payment method for the 7th time. And again, anytime you're using like a card-based payment method, Visa and MasterCard, and the banks are getting their 3%, right? So I think it will be slow in many cases, but this stuff will just become increasingly pervasive, and people will choose it if the kind of like platforms or creators are giving an incentive, right? Like if I can not have to pay 3% to a card network by having used a stablecoin, I'm going to make that the default payment method. And maybe I give you a 2% cash back, or you get some loyalty points or an NFT or whatever reason to get you to switch your payment method.
Yeah. What are you seeing? How do you think about international long term? I know the Farcaster network is like default international because crypto is default sort of borderless and international. But I feel like the conversation in the beginning of the 2020s was really around sort of social media censorship. And then, we had Balaji on the show earlier, and he's talked about this moment with X where created this kind of fragmentation and censorship on X potentially being solved. But then there's plenty of countries, globally that have even bigger issues than we have today around censorship. And so how do you think about enabling free speech through Farcaster over the long run?
Yeah, so we're a U.S.-based company, so I'm a big believer in the Constitution and U.S. laws. Farcaster basically is exporting that as like our social networks policy. So if I get a local jurisdiction somewhere in the world and says, please remove these activists from Farcaster, to quote Elon, they can shake their fists at the sky. We're beamed in over the internet. If you want to block our app or the network, go for it. But I think,
but then in theory, a dissident could spin up a new iteration of the app on the Farcaster network theoretically, and it would be out of your control, right? So it's
in addition that person could be directly posting like via the command line or something, and having it go out to a global audience. And so I think that the network design of Farcaster looks a lot more like a blockchain under the hood. And one of the reasons is it actually provides really strong censorship resistance, whereas something that's a bit more federated. So if you kind of look at like Mastodon or Blue Sky, like there are instances where they're already complying with local law of like, okay, well, we won't be able to serve our other users in this country because they will just shut down the whole site. So I think, again, it's not like a primary consideration, but should we be successful in continuing to scale the network, I'm confident that if you think that the US free speech laws are like a good baseline global policy, that's basically what Farcaster is going to follow in terms of our app.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much. We'd love to have you back and get more
come
updates.
back on again soon.
Thanks for having me.
I think you have some of the best, I'll put it on the record, some of the best taste in crypto.
Yeah.
When I put it out there, it shows up in the app and everywhere. And it's great to finally have you on. Come back on again soon.
I love the new studio.
Thank you.
Yeah, come by, do your next appearance in person.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's only 3 hours away from the West Side in Hollywood.
We'll talk to you soon, Dan.
Have a good one.
I went on X and I posted, the big Thiel fellow question that is on every application for the Thiel Fellowship is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? What is something you believe that very few people agree with you on? And I said, I believe it's possible to interview the entire Thiel Fellowship class on a single podcast episode. It could even happen today.
They said it couldn't be done.
They said it couldn't be done, but it's happening. Our next guest is here. Let's bring him in the studio. Stephen, how are you doing? Congratulations on the Thiel Fellowship. It's great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Would you mind giving us a little intro on yourself and the company you're building?
Yeah. I'll start with the company I'm building. We build non-invasive neuromodulators, so little devices stick on the back of your ears and stimulate this inner ear organ called the vestibular system, which controls your perception of motion to generate hallucinations of motion. So you can like toggle a button and feel yourself spinning around and flying around and stuff.
That's crazy. That's huge for VR, right? Because there was always this question of like, you know, if the VR can be very convincing visually and the audio can be very convincing, but I can't feel like I'm actually flying. But now maybe I can.
It's actually, there's actually an even bigger problem in VR, which is without this, you get incredibly motion sick. And so you can't play like most games. So when we started, one of the primary sellers was like, hey, we have VR devices that are ready to go. You can hop into a like ornithopter right now and fly around and feel like you're flying around. And we always have this guess that like, oh, you could also use this system to build therapeutics that are a lot more powerful than anyone else could ever build. At the time, the field didn't exist. And we were like, okay, we could be totally wrong. So we went in going like, all right, we're going to build the tech out for VR. Once we did, we realized that was surprisingly useful as a therapeutic to the point where it doesn't really make sense to do anything else. So that's mostly where we're at.
Of course. I mean, I think Neuralink's going through something similar where, you know, you could eventually everyone will have one and we'll be all communicating via Neuralink, but in the short term, let's just cure blindness and, you know, and help people who are paraplegic use the computer and play Civilization all night, which is amazing and miraculous. So are you going through an FDA pathway? Are you regulated as a medical device? Like, what is that process like? And can you take us through, like, again, reintroducing, like, what is the actual product experience for the person using it?
Yeah. Let me talk about that first, because then the regulatory pathway becomes a little bit more clear, even though it's still pretty messy. So the thing we build interacts with this sensory organ in your inner ear, right? And it's called the vestibular system. If you want to look it up, if you go to my Twitter, you see a video of me driving a human around with an RC steering wheel. Of just like controlling where they go. But there's a bunch of things you can do with it. But the most important one is the vestibular system evolved like so early on in the evolutionary chain that it's entangled with a bunch of deep brain regions that like some of it has some business being entangled with, and other parts it really doesn't have much business being entangled with it at all. And that's why you see like parents rocking their child to sleep. Like there's no good explanation for why that works, like from an evolutionary standpoint, except the connectivity is there. It kind of makes sense. So we started by like sending signals like that. And essentially what we did is we built like a precise modulator of this external sensory organ. And I think it's not really easy. These guys spent like 8 months cranking at it to figure out the things I couldn't figure out before we got it. But once you do, you can control a bunch of autonomic nervous system functions by making these almost like high-level API calls of like, oh, regulate your heart rate like this or your breathing rate like this. It makes brain stimulation a lot easier and allows you to do like actually important things. So the upshot of that is to make you sleep a lot better. We're doing some experiments on metabolism right now to see if we can try to beat Ozempic without all the side effects. But we're not there yet. I think on all of these things, we're not quite to where we want to be yet, but it's a lot further than Neurostim has ever gone before, and we're getting pretty damn close.
So what's your personal approach to testing? Are you testing everything on yourself first, kind of, you know, like a young Tony Stark, or what does it look like?
For everything I can say on air is I'm testing on myself very heavily. Everything is tested on me first. And the fun thing is like traditionally what you need in order to test whether these things work is you need like 50 people and you need to hold a controlled trial in order to see if there's some statistically significant, like if you have statistical power. But we built stuff that's like powerful enough that if you turn it on, like you know that it's on and you know what it's doing. Like I can't naturally sleep like this no matter how placeboed I am. There's no way to achieve this effect of like, oh, okay, I have 2.5 hours of M3 deep sleep tonight, which according to my Whoop is aberrant, and I've never experienced it in my life. Or like you turn it on, you feel the world start spinning. You don't need like n equals 30 to know that there's some stat sig. You turn it on and you feel your heartbeat drop or like your blood pressure rise. It's just like kind of instantaneous.
So what is the actual device experience for you or the consumer? Is this something I can put in and take out? Is it like, does it feel like an AirPod or something, or do I need to go into the knife? Am I going through surgery to get something installed?
Yeah. Hang on. Let me grab it.
Here we go.
So this is why we do this show. This is fantastic.
Colton, can you grab me an electrode? Thank you.
One electrode, please.
One of ours. Sticks to the back of your ears, and you can just like kind of peel it off when you want. I'm trying to grab one so I can show you.
But there's but there's no surgery. It doesn't actually have to go under the skin or anything like that.
That's kind of nuts, right? Like if I'm thinking about it, of like the central reason to do all this is for building most neurotech, you're kind of constrained by knowledge of the brain. The hardware is, compared to what we're used to building, not that hard. It's not rocket science. The big thing is you don't understand how this thing works at all, and that's a pretty big challenge.
Sure.
And you want to gather a lot of data in order to figure it out, and you can't really distribute something at scale in the near future without if you have to do surgery. What is it? It's like some 20, 30 surgeons are able to do the Neuralink surgery right now.
Well, they had to build a robot for it because it was so precise.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So this is what it looks like. We built some of our own hydrogel electrodes with AGCL backings. I'm just sticking in the back over here. We ripped this out of a system. Where's the full? The full system is just a headband that you put around.
Sure.
We're all pretty scrappy right now, and that leads into the regulatory question. It's not so clear. It depends what indication we go for. But right now, we silently hold state of the art for a couple different parts of neuromodulation that maybe I shouldn't say on air. But it's not clear which one is going, like month over month, a bunch of these effect sizes are going up literally like 1.5x every month or 2x every month. So it's not so clear when we hit diminishing return. But the upshot is like, we don't really think that humans should be like necessarily sleeping for 8 hours a night in order to get what we need. It's kind of weird that the way we lose weight or like become stronger is to go into a room and lift heavy objects for a very long time.
I'm going to stop you there. I think it's actually extremely cool that that's how we get stronger. But
we won't tolerate sleep slander on the show, but we will not
we're
tolerate.
Sponsored by 8 Sleep. I think sleeping's great. All of a sudden, I don't like any of this. You're taking away all the things I like.
So with the Thiel Fellowship money, the first thing I did was I bought 8 Sleep because it's amazing. It's an amazing product. The next thing I did is actually I placed a wholesale order for Lucy, which doesn't ship to Massachusetts anymore.
That's amazing.
So like we're pretty into this stuff, but like we think like it's kind of upper bounded, right? Like how much performance increase you can get. Whereas like if you start modulating the brain, you can get a lot better than that. So hopefully we'll get there in the near future.
So what is the feedback cycle? Obviously, like you're collecting data on sleep or stimulation or anything, and then you're feeding that back into some sort of system to adjust the neuromodulation. Is that cycle time like single days? It seems like you're moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, so well, it depends what you mean. If you're talking about like closed loop stimulation paradigms, like this is like milliseconds delay of like getting a signal, sending something back.
Sure.
But if we're talking about like how we develop, what we do is basically we do a couple of things. But when the effect sizes are large enough, you really only need to run a few trials, like 30 minutes each on each person for 4 or 5 people before you know that something's working. And most of the time it surprises you by doing some really weird things to your body. Like, I didn't expect that to happen. And we just like write it down in a lab notebook and be like, all right, this is what happened here. You can start parsing together how the brain works. And over time you get all these insights that it's hilarious. We confirmed a long-standing neuroscience theory yesterday that people haven't been able to prove or disprove for the last 10 years. Because we've just been running stuff. And it's like, oh, wait, this is the only explanation. So it's just stuff like this. Cycle time's usually around 2 or 3 days for us right now if we have to build new hardware and software. But if we don't, then they can be about like 2-3 hours, and we're trying to bring most things down to 2-3 hours.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations.
I'm extremely impressed and excited.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And feel free to consider us testing partners.
Oh yes. Also, if you ever
anything that can
set us up,
podcast longer,
send somebody on your team to set us up, and then you can watch the stream and just
maybe insteid of the soundboard, it triggers and we involuntarily laugh. We burst out into laughter.
Yeah.
That might be possible.
Shocking.
Yeah,
if you ever want to try the world spinning around thing, let me know and I can hook you.
Sounds horrible, but I'm in.
Do it.
I'm in. Count me in for the tilt-a-whirl in my brain.
Congratulations.
I'll talk to you soon.
We're super excited for you and the team.
This is fantastic. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll have you on again soon.
Bye.
Bye. Next up, we have Juan coming in to the studio. We're excited to keep this lightning round going. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Thiel fellows left for the day. And
they said it couldn't be done.
They said it couldn't be done.
Nobody believed.
Nobody believed.
Have some faith.
They said technology didn't need another podcast, and yet here we are. Welcome to the stream. How you doing, Juan?
Hey guys, how are you doing? Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Of course. Would you mind kicking it off with a little bit of an introduction on yourself and the company to get us started?
Absolutely. So I'm currently like the founder of Phase Labs. Phase Labs is a research lab that it's building that technology to regenerate complex organs directly in your body. So basically, imagine like imagine you lost a limb. Imagine you lost a limb, for example. You were like a warfighter. You went to the military. Maybe you suffer from diabetes and you had to be amputated. There's no way you could regenerate that right now. No way. You have to like rely on prosthetics, but prosthetics is kind of shit. Yeah. Honestly. And this happens. If you look, this happens not only with limbs, but actually with all the rest of the organs of the body. Sure. So we're building that technology. That's kind of the glimpse of it.
How much of this is like, I mean, this is pure sci-fi, feels like. Is this informed by, what is it, the salamander that breaks the tail off and then they regrow it? Back. Is this like Jurassic Park where you actually learn something from that? Or is there a different...
Well, didn't we got Ozempic from some crazy dragon?
Yeah, the Komodo dragon like or the Gila monster. What is the... Basically, I want to know, trace back for me the tech tree that got us to today. I imagine you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Is CRISPR relevant? Like, what is relevant to allow you to do this? Because this sounds like pure sci-fi to me.
Yeah, so I will start with that last line, like the CRISPR line, because I think that's extremely important. We are not doing genetic engineering. And that has advantages from regulatory point of view, but also like on the underlying R&D. I actually, and this might be controversial, but I actually don't think that you can solve this problem with genetic engineering. Like finding 1, 2, 3 genes that you can basically crack the problem. I don't think that's possible at all. We are basically modifying the physiological signals directly in the body. More specifically, we're leveraging electrophysiological signals. So a lot of people doesn't know, but the same signals that rule your brains actually are all over your body. Basically, when you were born, you were a single zygote. And literally that zygote self-assembled yourself into a living, human, functioning being. So
let's give it up for the zygotes.
Let's give it up for that. This is fantastic.
So basically what we have discovered, and this is work of the last 15, 20 years, is that these electrophysiological signals during the process of development encode information, instructive information to control morphogenesis, which is the process of growth and form of an organism. So yeah, definitely we are like on the shoulders of giants. That's a fact. Yeah.
Regrowing a hand, that seems like the final boss of this potentially. What's the easiest thing to regrow? Are you starting with like a fingernail and then you work your way up, or do you go for the hand straight out and try to one shot that? Like, is there something that we already regrow that we can maybe build on? Yeah, hair. Hey, we know the hair loss market. Maybe you should pivot into just hair loss. There seems to be a lot of money in that.
That would be extremely profitable, honestly. Yeah. Just as a matter of fact, I mean, human babies are able to regrow the tip of their fingers, of their digits.
If something happens,
like they are young. Yeah, that already happens.
That's
what happens is that like the human body lose this capacity throughout time, throughout aging. And now, like regarding the question, what is the final what is the final boss? I actually think the kidney, it's even anatomically speaking, it's even more complex than the limb. But the limb is right up there. Like these two indications will be kind of in the next 10, 15 years. These are kind of long-term research programs. On the short term, we're focusing on indications where we could basically move a lot faster in the next 5 years. So for example, chronic wound healing. This happens to diabetic patients when they suffer from ulcers, and it's actually the main cause of amputations worldwide. So we are basically cracking these initial problems first. Yeah.
What about something like scar tissue? Like a lot of people have like C-section scars or scars from anything. Is that relevant or like the same kind of biological process, or is that a different fork of the tech tree?
Yeah, actually, it's pretty similar. It's based on the same electrochemical signals in the regenerative process. So if you look, there are already in the market electric wound dressings that you actually can put in the skin and accelerate the wound process. But these are extremely limited to a stage 2 and stage 1 injuries. So for example, if you have like an injury of 5 millimeters, but once you start like involving like 1-2 centimeters, it starts to be incredibly more complex. You touch muscle, you touch bones, so that's a lot harder. Yeah, for this tech.
What's exciting about what's happening in the? I saw some recent news around a genetically edited pig kidney that was transferred into a human, and it sounds like it was somewhat effective. Is there anything that you guys can learn? Just immediately, my reaction to that is like, I would rather have a regular human kidney that was generated just for me instead of a genetically edited pig kidney that gets sort of transplanted in. But what are you learning from that space or tracking?
Yeah, I think those initiatives. I mean, any initiative that tries to crack the problem, it's worthwhile. But I'm quite skeptical with those approaches because there are a lot of questions regarding the immune system. How much, like, what would be the rejection of a human body in these cases? Like the immunogenicity of the related process, it's like a huge question mark. And I actually think that if we want to solve the regenerative problem, not only like one organ, but like actual regeneration, whole body regeneration, like Deadpool or Wolverine, for example, we actually need to leverage the fundamental mechanisms that the body already uses. So go there, understand what is the language, what is the code that the body uses for morphogenesis, and learn to modulate that code, like more fundamentally. I think that's important.
What's the user experience? You've been mentioning like electrostimulation. Is this not a pill that I take?
Yeah, so there's a continuum of technology, and this is important. So for the limb regeneration, the stimulation will be a lot more complex than just like electric currents. Of course, it's an anatomical structure that it's a lot more complex. But starting like with the chronic wound healing, with the short-term research program, we are working with a medical device approach in mind. Why? Because medical devices are a lot easier to pass through the FDA, do clinical trials on top of them. Once you start with biologics, they are extremely hard. So we want to accelerate that process first. And then I think that the ideal version of this technology is kind of a combination product where you use deep biophysical stimulation with light and ultrasound, but also leverage kind of the molecular specificity of proteins at the same time. Yeah.
If you're successful, as you sound like you're going to be, what is the craziest potential future that you could imagine? Are we regenerating entire versions of ourselves?
I want extra arms. Make me like Doc Ock.
Yeah.
I want Doc 6. Yeah, from Spider-Man. I want 6 arms.
What's the craziest potential?
You could potentially skip leg day technology and regrow your leg muscles. Can you imagine that?
John would love this.
Just massive quads without ever hitting the leg press. The world would change overnight.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. One important. Yeah, I think there are two variants of like a really optimistic, crazy future. The first one, I think it's more like a cultural change. We have like this idea that Thiel, that if you like you are able to edit yourself with maybe a robotic arm, and you are kind of a blend of robotic human person, like somehow you will be stronger. But that, I mean, that's just a bias that we have because we have not been able to engineer biology like successfully as we wanted. I would love like for humans to understand that biology could be as robust as any other thing, and even start relating this technology to aging itself. And of course, there's still like a gap in which that we should answer that to what extent regenerating all the organs of your body would be related to aging and increasing longevity. But I think we have big reasons to believe that it will be high connected. So basically expand like the lifespan of people like 100 years more to be able to be more productive, have like healthier lives, change our societal construct of what it's a meaningful life would be amazing. And then on the limit, it will be also awesome. It will be extremely awesome to be able to engineer like artificial biological networks in the same way that we are doing right now with artificial neural networks in AI. So basically constructs, biobots that can go out there and solve all sorts of problems for us. I think that would be amazing as well.
That is amazing. I love it. Congratulations, and thanks for breaking it down for us.
Yeah, this is super exciting.
It's a lot. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
It's not a simple business. This is amazing, though.
I'm very excited.
But yeah, I mean, we could do a whole hour on this. So yeah, we'll have to have you back. This is fantastic. Thanks so much for stopping by. Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye. Next up, we have Teddy Warner coming into the studio. While we get him queued up, let me tell you about Figma. Think bigger, build faster. Figma helps design and development teams build great products together. You can get started for free. Go to figma.com. It's a fantastic product. Jordy's addicted. He's a Figma addict. He can't stop using Figma. He designs endless slide decks in it. Our beautiful website, tbpn.com, was designed in Figma. We've actually experimented. The entire overlay that you've seen, this is all from Figma and then gets baked into our production software, which we don't talk about because it's our secret. It's our secret sauce. Anyway, welcome to the stream, Teddy. Good to have you here. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Thanks for having me. I heard y'all are in a new studio, which is exciting.
This is the first day. We have a giant gong.
Yeah, it's an honor.
We're christening it with Thiel Fellow Tuesday. We're very excited to have you here.
They said it couldn't happen.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself? Break us down. What are you building? How'd you get there? Where'd you grow up? Give me the whole thing.
I'm Teddy from North Carolina.
Cool.
I used to work in a makerspace and a machine shop. This is my technical baseline. One way or another, found myself in California, worked at Midjourney in a past life. Now I run a robotics lab called Intempus.
This is so funny about the Thiel Fellowship, really quickly. Like, the whole idea is like dropping out of college, and Jordy was making this joke that like, the Thiel Fellowship has a combined, 5 years of work experience because like no one's supposed to have worked, and it's like a joke that every startup's like, well, you have 20 years of management experience combined. But like most of you that we've talked to have years of experience somehow. So were you working and going to school? Like, how did you work at Midjourney while not have like dropping out yet?
If you want the very abridged Teddy timeline, is I grew up in North Carolina, worked in this machine shop in this makerspace for about 4 years. Somehow wound up in biotech. Cool. I was doing manufacturing for invasive electrodes for chronically ill children. So everything from EEG to ECG electrodes.
Very cool.
Just an engineer. Discovered I was actually like exceedingly squeamish. And so on a whim, went to university in LA at USC for about a year. Studied art.
Jordy's back.
I'm back. I had to hit the air horn.
How's it going?
For SC.
Yeah, let's go.
We love USC. Had a total blast. Studied art and technology and a bit of business and some film and the whole shebang. I know when you go to California, you get pretty caught up in the culture. And so unsurprisingly, I started a venture, wound up meeting Midjourney David through this venture, which is how I wound up at Midjourney.
Very cool.
About a year ago now.
Nice.
Left 9 months ago. Now I run a robotics lab called Intempus. I make robots expressive. Okay. Robots currently suck at communicating what they're doing. They're really hard to understand. You have to pay expensive nerds like me to come use the command line anytime you're trying to understand what they're up to. Mm-hmm. And so I make them communicate like every other mammal and like every other human, such that you can interact with a robot even though you don't speak its language.
What are we talking about? Robots?
I felt like it was pretty easy. That robot that was like on a stand.
Like flailing around, killing everyone. That was
pretty easy to understand.
Some of it's telltale.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about like industrial robots, like KUKA arms and stuff, or are we talking Roombas or the future humanoid robots? Like, what's the first product that you think what's the first robot that really needs humanization?
Sure. I mean, as you can tell, like robots is probably the largest umbrella term that we have. It spans from humanoids to like glorified Roombas and everything in between. So how do you make them expressive? Well, I think it's quite telltale if I have an anthropomorphic robot, like a humanoid. I can say, oh, it waves, or it smiles, or moves around, and this makes sense. But Intempus focuses on non-anthropomorphic robots, specifically the ones that already exist. So where do robots exist? They exist in industry. Yeah, robots work great in industry. 99% of the time, they work wonderfully. Like if you think about an Amazon warehouse, there's a bunch of little Roombas that roll around and move the carts and stuff. And on occasion, probably 1% of the time, these robots fail. and they hardly ever fail for technically complex reasons. Usually robots fail for some trivial reason. Say, Jordy's in an Amazon warehouse and there's a Roomba trying to pass him and it gets stuck because Jordy's in his way. So the Roomba, the robot in the warehouse just fails and it leaves a fail code in the command line and it moves on and does something else. And what Intempest does is we allow these robots to be expressive. We allow them to convey their intent to people like Jordy in this case, who would not otherwise understand what the robot is trying to do. So what if this robot, upon seeing Jordy in his path,
I'm non-technical.
nippy?
I'm not-technical. Just really,
not a shot.
Just put me down.
If you see a robot like getting nippy with you, like a small dog, it's like, oh shit, I should probably move out of the robot's way. So you can save a bunch of money on debug costs. And also reduce downtime of robots just by allowing them to communicate what they're up to. And in the future, of course, we'll get into consumer and service and humanoids, but right now it's all in industry.
Awesome. You gave the example of Amazon. They acquired Kiva Systems in 2017, 8 years now. I'm sure they're thinking about this. Is Amazon the right customer for you, or do you want to start kind of in the more mid-market, or do you want to be more, product-led growth, developer-led growth, hackers, get into like the next generation of robotics companies? What's the go-to-market look like?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts here. So Intempest's initial customer base are all enterprise robotics manufacturers. They're people who sell the robots to Amazon. And seemingly everyone is vertically integrating in this policy space. I think it's hardly prophetic for me to say that we're going to have a lot of robots in the future, whether it be in industry or in service or in consumer, and that these robots are going to have to interact with humans. And it's quite shocking that, not many people are focused on the interaction layer, how humans and robots are going to interact. Instead, they're focused on making robots functional. And so I'd love if more players like Amazon and big players would get into this space. I want you guys to imagine, like, say you're walking down Hollywood to the office in 10 years from now, and you pass by 20 robots. And one robot is running an Amazon model, and one is running an Intempest model, and one is running a Tesla model. This is like the same experience as going to talk with, like walking down the street and chatting with a Nigerian, and then a Canadian, and then a Lithuanian. There's 3 different languages, 3 different dialects, 3 different humors. It's a terrible user experience. And so it's seemingly very important that we figure out one standardized means of human-robot interaction. And the way that I'm proliferating into this space is through the enterprise manufacturers that are selling robots to big companies, to small companies. As long as there's a scalable impact, I'll work with them.
Cool.
How influenced are you by movies like WALL-E, right? This sort of the fun robot. It feels like you want robots to be doing serious work, but have it be sort of enjoyable to interact with them. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big Interstellar fan.
TARS, great robot.
TARS is killer. TARS is killer. There's one scene in Interstellar where Cooper sets TARS humor level or truth level to like 90%.
90%, yeah.
One of the tricks like behind making robots expressive is giving them emotions, because what are you expressing? Well, you're expressing emotions. And you can view all of these as scalars. And so I can give robots a 90% humor level or a 90% joy level. And so it's pretty cool. Like it was shocking to me how on point TARS is. There's a whole bunch of like interesting media that came out of the creation of Interstellars on how they simultaneously made TARS. He's a cold ex-military robot, and yet also Cooper's best friend. And so this is great. Absolutely the intention.
Fantastic. Talk to me about the tech stack. I imagine that you mentioned command lines. Are you doing post-training on a foundation model? Are you using Llama, open source stuff? Like how do you actually solve the technical problem? What is deeper in the supply chain of your tech stack?
So as I mentioned earlier, like seemingly everyone is focused on vertically integrating control policy. All the big companies are doing this, and you get big horizontal companies that are awesome, like physical intelligence. And I really don't want to compete with these people. In fact, I want to work with them. And so when I initially put my mind to how do I construct this architecture, I had to say, like, okay, I absolutely need to be an augmentation atop the transformer layer. So after a robot is told what to do by its decision transformer, I run this interaction layer. Now, I want you guys have both heard the phrase time flies when you're having fun.
Of course.
This is like a pretty integral way in which humans perceive the world. The inverse is also true. Your perception of time moves slower when you're stressed. And so we have fun and stress to emotions, and they change how we perceive the world subjectively. And so what Intempest does, we equip these things called time constants. The question is like, time flies when you're having fun. What is time for a robot? Well, time is compute. So what if you could allocate compute such that when a robot is having fun or when it's, not needed to do any like daunting task, it can use the minimum amount of compute necessary. It can move as quickly as possible. But when a robot is stressed, and it's failing, it should use more compute to collect more data so we can train and squash the edge case, and B, convey why it fails to, again, people in factories and people that would otherwise not understand what the robot is trying to do.
Yeah, and that aligns with like test time inference scaling rules now, where you want to do more reasoning for harder problems. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anything else, Jordy? Are we good?
I think we're good, but come back on again soon, Teddy.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
This is
Thanks
super
for having me,
exciting,
guys.
and I look forward to interacting, speaking the in Tempest language with many robots throughout my life.
Me too. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Cheers, dude.
Bye. Next up, we have Sigil, founder of Extraordinary, coming on the stream. Very excited to have him. I gotta say, these Thiel fellows pretty punctual.
They're so. I was about to say
late. This is a very crazy thing. You get this calendar invite, you just hop on the stream, but he's here right on time.
It's that weird time.
It's amazing.
Hey, join at 1:42. Sigil, great to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. It's been a super fun day so far. The class is absolutely stacked, and congrats on making it in. Why don't you start with a bit of backstory, your personal story, and then what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm Sigil, the founder of Extraordinary.com. We are the Extraordinary Talent Company of America. If you Google O1 Visa for extraordinary ability, you'll find my face as the cover image. And I'm the guy going around giving out these Alien of Extraordinary Ability hoodies that you see on your X feed.
Amazing. Talk about your personal journey to kind of building this company.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I built this project that was, I think he did like 100K in revenue this first month. And I used the funds to pay someone to finish high school for me. And I flew to San Francisco. And I came here on a tourist visa. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I'm like, holy shit, these people are these people are incredibly ambitious. I have to stay here. And if you don't go to college, at the time I originally got into the M&T program at the University of Pennsylvania. I decided to opt out because I was pretty stubborn. I really just wanted to be in Silicon Valley. And the only visa options was the O1 for extraordinary ability. And this is what the US government calls it. And at the time, this was probably 3 years ago, it wasn't as proliferated. The one person I knew was Patrick Collison who had that. I couldn't get a TN visa or the H-1B because you needed a degree. So I had to go for the O1. And I hunted down every single person in Silicon Valley that had the O1 visa, tried to understand what could qualify. And after 8 months with an immigration lawyer, I filed it. It was sponsored by Naval. I built this company with him, and I was approved at 20. And I was like, holy shit, it's so hard for the world's best talent to come here. It's so unintuitive. And I made a YouTube video about the process that has been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. And I made this hoodie during as merch for that YouTube video. So, and that kind of took off.
What are the overall trends in the O1 visas? It feels like, I mean, like immigration's obviously complicated, but it feels like all the stars align for like everyone being like O1s are great. Elon has come out and said he loves O1s, and like it feels like it's aligned with American values and freedom and like brain drain and even strategic stuff. Like there's a lot of pro. Are the number of O1s increasing? Is this a new program? Can you give us like a little bit of like history and trajectory for the O1 program broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that the O1 was created for the Manhattan Project. I think it's that ethos. I don't know the exact origins, but it's been around, and it's been used to. The premise of it is that you are the top. You're an individual who has risen to the top of your field. I like to say you're like the top 0.1 percentile at what you do. And USCIS has these 8 criteria to adhere towards. You can be a tattoo artist, you could be a chip designer, you could be the founder of the fastest growing AI company who I'm currently helping out. As long as you can prove that you are extraordinary at what you do, you can get it. And I think for the longest time it's very unclear, because when you go to the website, it's like examples. You have a Nobel Prize or like whichever. And the way this company came to be was I literally mapped down 500 people who have O1s and EB1s for extraordinary ability. I gave them these hoodies. I actually built a website and just compiled them in terms of like their stories and like how they came to America. And yeah, I think that because of that, more and more people have been applying for it. There's no cap to it. As long as you meet their bar for and convince USCIS that you're extraordinary, you can get it. And so I think it's very positive sum of the visa.
Yeah. So what is the process actually like? I imagine that there's a lot of paperwork and lawyers and cost stuff that's, tailor made for LLM automation and just normal SaaS apps and stuff and form filling. What are the headaches that O1 recipients typically report as particularly painful?
I mean, my process took 8 months. It cost me more than $10,000.
Wow.
I mean, you gotta keep in mind what is the end product? I have a printer here. You're literally printing 500 pages of paper, like with a bunch of citations to all evidence. You might have heard like there's recommendation letters too, which you got to go chase down people and be like, hey, can you please vouch for me being in America? I think I could contribute to this economy.
One-shotted by a ChatGPT from now on. You can imagine.
So many M dashes. There's thousands of M dashes.
Let's delve into why he should be a O1. I'm sure that's happening.
That got shipped off to like USCIS, Texas. They still break open the box and then scan it, which is like super archaic.
Wow. They don't even accept like a PDF.
No, they don't. So I have to ship it through FedEx and then receive it, and then they parse
and then they
through
scan it.
Yeah, and then some like
scan it. Wow.
Very efficient.
ISO diploma just adjudicates whether you're extraordinary.
Okay.
Well, we're big fans of paper, but even that.
Even that's my stretch.
What how have you thought about the business model for extraordinary? It feels like there's some immediate, probably upfront value that you can capture and just making this process less painless. But when you think about taking somebody at the absolute top of their field and bringing them to the best economy in the world, where they're going to attract other talent and capital and things like that, it feels like a lot of the value creation is on the things that they.
I mean, the obvious business model here is to sell the data to venture capital firms.
Yes.
Which I feel like might already be happening, judging by the involvement of Naval.
I mean,
what's the actual business model? Jokes aside.
Yeah, so I'm tempted to rename the company to the Extraordinary Talent Company of America. Our flagship first product, obviously, just making this much more seamless and faster. Like, I think it should be a standard deviation of speed up, which already is. We already power ramp, cognition, and we work with one of top founders building companies that we know, and we should see a lot more of that on our X feeds coming along. I mean, look, you can make a good amount from providing the best product and serving these great talent to relocate here on the visa basis, but where I want to take things, like I don't actually view this ultimately as a visa filing company. I think it's an extraordinary talent company, and if you look at the life cycle of extraordinary talent, like someone who's, I don't know, like a senior engineer who's shipped like 60% of Devon. I just filed that O1 case actually, right? Like the whole life cycle of them, one being like placed at their company all the way to how they even relocate there. Like most of the value capture isn't actually that like visa filing. And I think also AI is gonna eat away at margins in terms of services across all technology companies. And so then like what can you build that has network effects, that has innate distribution, that can just attract the world's best talent? Like I want to build something where if you're remotely ambitious and talented, you have a means to be discovered. And if you remotely want to come here, like you're going to be on extraordinary.com.
Cool. How do you think about giving people an opportunity to get to America without having credentials yet, right? Like presumably there's somebody out in the world who's 16 years old, they're in some like high school type situation, and they actually could be one of the world's best programmers or something like that, but maybe they haven't gotten a job. Is there a world in the future where you would create sort of like open testing where people could kind of like prove their abilities? I'm sure somebody would figure out how to hack it pretty quickly, but how do you think about kind of creating the ability for people to prove their capabilities prior to getting the ability to get traditional credentials?
Yeah, first off, I actually got a 16-year-old approved for an O1 visa a few weeks ago.
What are they extraordinary at?
Interaction design for
Roblox.
Amazing.
The most elite Roblox player.
And on the talent discovery front, I think that the way that we value talent is evolving. I mean, right now, like it's so funny. Like there's Mercor, but then the founder of Cluely is like building software that hacks the Mercor interviews.
Oh yeah.
The proxies for measuring talent are just like falling through completely. Thanks.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And so, like, how do you then measure talent in this new age where, we value people who are able to leverage AI much more? And I think the way that companies hire will evolve, and we need to account for that. We need ways of assessing people, but also discovering people to showcase just how like competent they are. And I'm a very big believer of being able to give those means to people around the world, regardless of their traditional accolades, and just being able to empower people who have the merit and who have the ability, and they should be discovered and sponsored to come to America.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Well, congratulations on getting into the Thiel Fellowship.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there will be many Thiel Fellows in the future that go through your program.
Yeah, already helping them.
I'm excited for the first O1 bodybuilder. We saw what happened with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he came to America, had a fantastic impact outside of bodybuilding.
Went on to be the governor of California.
Governor of California. Pretty good one.
So don't count out the bodybuilders.
So let's just get all the elite bodybuilders from all over the world, bring them here on O1s. That's my goal.
As long as you're the top at what you do, we help you.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for coming on.
We'll talk
Congrats.
to you soon.
Cheers.
Next up, we have Koki Mashita coming into the studio. Our last Thiel Fellow of the day. Finishing it out strong. Welcome to the stream, Koki. How are you doing? Sorry for keeping you waiting. We were running long.
Welcome.
But you're here.
No
Please
worries.
introduce yourself and the company that you're building.
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. Thanks for the time. I'm Koki, originally from Japan. Cool. I spent a lot of time growing up thinking about natural disasters. I think, in SF, you don't, it's like nice weather, everything's, kind of nice, and you get to work on really, really interesting things. But, I was in the 2011 earthquake where, 18,000 people died in a couple of days. And a lot of my friends, homes were destroyed. And you have these typhoons, right? That blow away my grandparents' roofs every 3 years or so. And I keep asking them why? You can just move because you're in Typhoon Alley. What's the whole point of having to stay there? But it's something so deeply ingrained, right? It's something that you accept, that you kind of just accept as feet. And I was talking to the environment minister and the infrastructure minister of Japan recently, and they were saying that they spent billions of dollars on disaster infrastructure. They would build these columns under Tokyo, right? So when it floods, the water can go in.
Wow.
Yet they were oh shoot, we haven't actually solved the problem, which is the intensification of these events. But back then I was 11 and I did not know that you can actually start to fight these natural disasters. But I started just building, robots when 3D printers were really popular, started selling them. And then the money I made from that, I put into Bitcoin, and then got into hedge funds in high school. And I started a small one. And then in college, I came across this startup, which was building AI weather forecasts. As not many people think about weather forecasting as this huge expense that you have to take on. But when you look at these larger countries, they spend about $2 billion per year on supercompute. Essentially, a big chunk of the world's supercomputers are used on running partial differential equations to be able to calculate the weather, right? It's something that you don't really think about. And with machine learning, what you're able to do is reduce costs by 99% and increase resolution by 100 times. And when you see that, we started out, very small, like 5 people, but, I was splitting time at Berkeley and then at the startup. And we became like the national weather forecast for the Philippines, where it's, it was a lot more affordable. And I start to think about, okay, wow, like our understanding of, not only just Earth itself, but like being able to, model, gather data, and then predict has gotten so much better. I start to think about like, what's the next natural step, right? Like the whole point of gaining, more intelligence is so that you can act upon it. And that's what I started to think about. Can't really specifically tell you what we're doing in terms of, the application layer, but this is kind of like the transformation we're thinking about.
So is it magic? Is it spells?
Are you going to bomb the hurricane? Is it a bomb? I've heard that pitched before.
I wonder where you heard that from. It's 10,000 times the power of a hurricane. Hurricanes are interesting, right? Because the power, the amount of energy that goes in there is so strong. Like if you look at Google research, they used to have this program where they're trying to harness energy out of a hurricane. And if you can, harness it properly, you can power the United States for months and months just from one hurricane.
That's incredible.
Wow. That's like a crazy thing to think about.
So you're going to make them, and then you're going to control them, and you're not, and then there's going to be a bunch of sci-fi offshoots where Koki
better be nice to me.
Koki had a good thing going. He was powering a lot of data centers with his homegrown hurricanes, and then one got out of control.
But talk to me about weather forecasting and kind of the data sources, because obviously, yes, a massive kind of revolution in AI, machine learning generally. But
you slipped in that you're doing the weather forecasting for the Philippines.
Yeah,
like you guys are like a data provider already?
The previous company I worked at during school, that's what we're focused on. And a lot of it is coming up with models, right? How can you compute these partial differential equations more efficiently with the same amount of data you have? And so you look like DeepMind or NVIDIA coming up with their like frontier models, right? Like being able to run diffusion based models to forecast better. But for us, what we think is fundamental is collecting data that no one really has. Like software has become so commoditized that like now it's just like Claude and then an XAI and then like OpenAI. It's just like a never-ending battle. For us, it's like, how can you collect data and how can you like see the world in a different way that allows you to act upon it, and how can you causally act upon like a weather phenomena, right?
You mentioned diffusion. Is there a distinction between weather forecasting using diffusion models versus transformer-based models or token prediction models? Like, is that a meaningful distinction, or are you kind of using the term broadly?
It gets really complicated in a sense that I think, both of them are good at, kind of milking as much information, looking at, okay, what are the latent parameters? How can you figure out somewhat unnoticeable characteristics within weather models? But I think the interpretability of weather models also become very important, right? Like if you can like characteristically like define, okay, which parameter within a high dimensional vector, right, is creating a lot of bias, how can you tweak that so that you can get back on track? And this like weather is so chaotic that like even one small perturbation in an initial condition can really mess up the forecast. And that's why it's really difficult to forecast like a week out. And so being able to like assimilate data as you go, and that's why like we're focusing on, okay, how can you collect data that no one really has, so that you can make sure you're not like de-biased too much.
Talk to me about the data sources for this. I'm familiar with like Doppler radar systems that like the local news has. But are satellites playing a role now in weather prediction? Is the actual data that we're gathering to build these models on top of improving? And what are the key vectors that are driving better data going into these models?
Yeah, satellite data is interesting. A lot of reanalysis data has always been used, and it's made by NOAA or ECMWF. Unfortunately, NOAA is not doing too well now. What we're doing is building sensors and then literally like flying into storms or into clouds to measure within them, right? It's a complex convective process that you really have to, just send something in to measure it. Yeah.
Autonomous vehicle, I assume?
No.
Flying the plane personally?
Our focus is on how can you build infrastructure, right? Like infrastructure in the sense that, okay, models are a part of the infrastructure, but how can you collect data for, a targeted, vehicle? So for example, like hurricanes are interesting, right? Like, I'm sorry, like I can't, say everything in detail, but in terms of hurricanes, it's like, okay, if you want to see how convection is happening, what about, the density of clouds, what kind of grapple columns and water droplets exist, you really just have to, fly like a plane in there. Like it's hard to just do like drones because it's too turbulent, or these like sensors are, too big. And so thinking about that is an interesting problem as well. But I think fundamentally, right, what we're pushing against is that many of these, reactive methods of disaster, if you look at, insurance, right? Like there's about like $140 billion per year in insurance premiums issued in the US for like tropical cyclones. And yet like insurance premiums have doubled every single year for the last, 4 or 5 years in many coastal cities. And when you look at like another catastrophe happening, like last year, Hurricane Helene and Milton was bad, but it could have been a lot worse. They weren't even Category 5s. And Congress had to give out $100 billion in aid, right? But when a next Hurricane Katrina happens in, Florida, for example, then insurance is just going to be insolvent in many ways.
Is there a market for better weather data by itself? I mean, it sounds like fighting the hurricane is important, but we talked to somebody who works in data brokerage loosely and said like everyone talks about, oh, we'll sell it to the hedge funds, but there's only like 5 hedge funds that buy anything, and they're kind of stingy apparently, and they don't really buy that much data. You think about the insurance market, $140 billion, but if you're an insurer and you know that, a whole bunch of houses are going to be destroyed in 2 weeks, or in 4 weeks, you're not really going to be able to adjust premiums that fast to make up for that. So it feels like, and then you look at the government might want to know, but even then it's like, are they really a good buyer?
I'm just to continue spitballing. In California, when there's certain communities that are threatened, they'll have like private fire response.
I guess that makes sense.
Basically, even an HOA.
Is that a good, but is that a reasonable market?
I'm just thinking about like
what are you thinking?
the dynamic right now where a hurricane is effectively forming. And the response is to watch it and then tell people to evacuate based on where you think it's going to go. And it's kind of insane that we don't have any sort of proactive response to say, hey, this thing is progressing to being more and more intense. Can we, sort of stop it?
Yeah. So data market. I don't know how much you can talk about it. We might just have to have you back on when you can talk.
No, when you look at insurance, it's pretty insane. Like they look at, okay, what does, hurricane damage look like in the last 40 years? Okay, let's, aggregate, average, and then kind of, add bias for like some of the intensification of these events or the increase in the exposure. And that's all you do. And so a lot of the interesting financial assets come up when you look at like catastrophe bonds. Right? Like they're like certain hedge funds that literally just trade on catastrophe bonds, right? And it's just about like estimating what is the arbitrage in terms of how much wildfire is going to wipe out a certain city, or same for hurricanes as well.
No, makes a ton of sense. We'll have to have you back when you can talk more about the product and where you're going with the company. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much for hopping on. This is a real pleasure.
Excited to hear more.
And congratulations. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Cheers.
time.
Bye.